Welcome, everybody, to another BOLDcast live stream. I'm Carson,
I'm Lindsay.
and this is the Attack on Titan ending review live stream discussion podcast thing. The biggest anime is over, as I think Trash Taste said. They were like, there was the title they did. The biggest anime has ended. Oh god, I can't reach for my drink as the palm fronds. And it's kind of a crazy thing, as everyone knows. And today we're going to be talking about what we thought of the ending from the perspective of people who were hyped up on how terrible the ending was going to be, and as people who ended up really enjoying it. And that's kind of going to guide most of the discussion, I think. For context, or for people who maybe didn't watch all of our reactions or haven't heard us talk about Attack on Titan, I started watching Attack on Titan in late 2013 or 2014, just after season 1 ended. I got recommended to watch it. I was not into anime, and I watched Death Note, and then my friend told me to watch Attack on Titan, so I watched Attack on Titan, and I really loved it, and it was the first manga series that I started reading, and I read the manga for years, up until the events halfway through the first part of season 4, or closer to the end, I think. Up to we're gonna be spoiling the hell out of Attack on Titan, just so you know. We're right up until
please leave.
right up until like the reveal that like Zeke's spinal fluid was in the wine. That was like the last chapter that I read that I was caught up with, and then I stopped. And then I was gonna, and because I let them bank, I used to let them bank up for like 6 or 8 months and then read them. But then we started the channel, so I went back to an anime fan and started waiting for the anime to come out, and then when the ending happened and we were doing reactions and stuff like that, we clearly had a different opinion than a lot of the people who watch reactions. I guess not a different opinion than a lot of the people who not on the ending, but on the content of the show, with things like the Jaegerists and stuff like that. And we had a different opinion than a lot of the people who watched our reactions. And that's a subset of the fan base that I think is a little bit more enthusiastic about certain points of the story than the overall fan base of manga readers, but it's a substantial portion, and a lot of the people who were kind of disagreeing with what we thought of the show and our opinions on sort of the morality of the show and our review and everything, were the same people that were kind of saying that we were going to dislike the ending. And I kind of, part of me kind of wishes that I was still a manga reader around that time, because it was, it seemed like it was a really good time to be a fan, but we heard just day in, day out that like the ending was terrible, and we kind of had, especially me, around, I don't know, sometime in season 4. I mean, I kind of knew even when I was reading the manga that like it was trending towards the ending of a different show. I guess we could. Do we want to spoil that show? I think it's kind of a part of the whole conversation at this point, but yeah. Anyway, Lindsay had not at that point seen the show that everyone is comparing the ending to, and I had, so I didn't want to like say at many points that like, oh, this reminded me a lot of. I bet it's gonna end up just gonna turn out like this show.
I think you did mention one time you were like,
I think eventually I did.
I don't know if you said the name of the show, but I seem to remember you saying there's like another anime that I'm not gonna say that I think this is gonna end like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I did. I held my tongue for a while because I wasn't sure whether I wanted to like go down that road or say that, but eventually it's like, I mean, it's just what I think, so I might as well share it. But yeah, I kind of saw a version of this kind of ending coming for the last 3 or 4 years, but I was afraid that it was going to be a lot sloppier than it was, and it wasn't perfect, but and we'll get into all the details and everything, but overall I was expecting to feel weird about the ending because of how everybody was hyping it up, but I really ended up enjoying it as somebody who's been with the series for so long. I think it fit very well with all the themes that had been brought up, dying for, I don't know, we get in all the details, I guess, but overall I think that it fit a lot with my interpretation of the series and the way that I felt about Isayama's writing style. I felt like it was very consistent the rest of the everything that came before. It was less consistent with the tone that I think a lot of people and that the story was kind of taking towards the end in the content of season 4. But if you look at the series as a whole, I think the ending is pretty congruent with everything else that was going on. Somebody said I prefer Wit Studio than Mappa, and that's another thing that I'll get into more in detail as we go along. But anyway, I just want to give my overall opinions before Lindsay gives her overall opinions. But yeah, I definitely prefer the universe where Wit Studio is able to continue with the whole show. I think that Mappa didn't drop the ball by any means, but aesthetically and in terms of that consistency, I really like season 1 and season 2 and season 3's approach visually.
Carson has a video on his favorite scene from season 1 on our channel. I have
a video essay that I did 2 years ago that I was going to continue doing a series of, but I never ended up doing it. But yeah, you can go watch that if you want to hear me explain why I think Attack on Titan season 1 is the best season. But yeah, what do you think of? What was your overall opinion of the ending?
Oh well, I will say I watched this show for the first time with Carson relatively. I would say like 5 years ago. At this point is when we started watching Attack on Titan.
We watched the first episode 5 years ago, and you said you fucking did not want to watch any more of it. You hated it, and you thought it was dumb. And then it was another year or year and a half until we moved in shortly before we started the channel, when we binged the whole thing because you really loved it.
Yeah.
And at that point, it was only up to the end of season 3.
Yeah. Well, I think because we had watched, I used to have this thing where pretty much anything, any like new thing that I would watch, I just immediately did not like because I didn't like new things. So yeah, funnily enough, we started a channel where like our entire livelihood revolves around us liking new things for the most part. But yeah, I remember I watched the first episode and just didn't really feel very connected to it. I didn't really care too much about it. And obviously as we watched more and I got more into it, then I liked it more. And I think for me, like as we've had this channel and as we've watched so many more things, because I wasn't really that into anime before, but I also wasn't really that into like TV shows or like movies that much. I'm the kind of person that if I like find a show or a movie that I like, then I will watch that thing multiple times rather than go on and find something new. And I think that obviously has had to change a lot and has kind of changed my perspective on like things changing, and also just things changing within a series, because in Attack on Titan, there are like multiple moments where the story just kind of takes a kind of a turn, like at first it's like, oh, there's like these Titans and we're gonna go and get them. And then, what is it, in late season 2 or early season 3 with like Kenny, and then you're like fighting people, like other people. And it's like, oh, this is like a big change, and you're learning more about the Titan powers, and the Titans are people. And it's like, oh, that's like really crazy too. And then in season 4, which is where we started reacting to it, then you come in and it's like, oh, this is a completely different thing right now. We're in Marley. We're seeing like these random kids that like these aren't the main characters. This is very strange. So I think a lot of like in the early times of me watching Attack on Titan, I think I didn't appreciate a lot of the things that now, especially after the end, I really do appreciate, like looking back. And also I've we watched it that first time, and then I've rewatched the whole thing since then again. So I think I now being like more analytical and more critical of things has helped me to appreciate the story as a whole. And then seeing the ending, like the very final episode, made me love it way more than I think I would have if it was pretty much any other ending. And even in the previous special, like the one that was before this last one. I liked that, but at that point I wouldn't say Attack on Titan was probably even in my top 5 of favorite anime, honestly. And I have to like think about it, but I feel like it's like with the ending, I feel like it moved up a lot in my rankings just to have like that kind of closure, and it ended in a way that I really like, and I think part of that comes from like lately we, especially after Hunter x Hunter, I feel like I've just like really been loving like stories that end like satisfyingly but also like open-ended, you know? And I feel like that's like in the end of Attack on Titan, how it's like there's like a resolution for the characters, and then but time still continues on, and it's like kind of left ambiguous at the end. And I do kind of like that.
Yeah. Cool. Is it in your top 5 now? Somebody asks.
I would have to think about it.
For me, Attack on Titan was always like my number one thing. Like for a long time, it was like by far my number one thing. And I even liked the manga, despite a lot of people like kind of. I think obviously a lot of people like the manga, but I think a lot of people, and even Isayama himself, views the manga as sort of a larva stage for the anime. Like the anime was. It was definitely clear from season 3 part 1's content of like the Uprising arc onward, and even some parts of like season 2. Like once the anime got made, I guess not. I guess the season 2 content in the manga was already written by the time that season 1 came out. At some point in the story, it reading the manga at least felt sort of like Isayama was approaching it like it was sort of the first draft, not the first draft. Like he still obviously is incredible and put a lot of effort into it, but there was always just kind of this looming thing of, oh well, there's a little wiggle room. Like once this becomes like the solid thing, and like once this becomes adapted, that's like the final stroke of paint. It always kind of felt like that, and but I even love the manga. I love the whole thing from start to finish. But I don't really know where to take all of this, because we just kind of liked the ending. It's a lot easier to discuss like our opinions on the ending if there's somebody to argue against. I remember like right after it ended, I was in Discord talking to a viewer of ours, some dude, and we were like going back and forth on the ending and everything. And I think where I come down on with the ending is obviously it wasn't perfect, but I think a lot of people are just not used to things ending. I think that's a big reason why a lot of people didn't like the ending. There's a few reasons that I've kind of thought of as to why they might not like not just like, oh, this thing was weird or this thing was wrong, but I think that the reasons why people nitpick on the specific things in this case is because is for like larger sort of broader reasons, like culturally. And one of those is that we're just, especially anime fans, are just not used to things ending. I think that it's just very strange to like in a medium where so many things just get canceled, like especially manga. Like how many manga actually have a satisfying conclusion that was like, obviously Attack on Titan's manga was, Isayama has been very open about the fact that he's changed the endings multiple times. But having some sort of direction and having some sort of resolution in his mind from the very beginning, like some kind of thing. From the very beginning, it was just like everyone was supposed to die. You don't have to keep muting. I was just doing that while I was going on or while you were talking a lot, but you don't have to keep doing it. He's been very open about changing the ending multiple times, and originally he was just going to have everybody die. That was like his big crazy ending, is he was just going to have all of the new Levi Scott with all the youngsters. They were just all gonna fucking die, and that was gonna be it, and it was just gonna be a big tragedy. And then as the series gained popularity, he was like, maybe I could do something different, and then he kept growing it, and then he clearly was playing around with some version of this ending and the rumbling from the end of season 1's content, when the Titan came in the walls and stuff like that. But I think that broadly, it's just that when we have to it's just uncommon for us to have to deal with all of these things, this big expansive world, and all of it has to, it builds out, and then you have to kind of taper everything down when you're writing a story to the ending, and it has to end on a single point, it has to end on a single scene, it has to end on a single sentence. And to be living in a world that is so expansive and with so many people in it, and to be experiencing that and be so immersed in that with different countries and different political structures and cultures woven into everything and all these different philosophies, to have everything sort of boiled down to one crystallized thing is ultimately going to be disappointing for a lot of people, especially for the modern era, especially again in the culture of anime and manga, where so many things are either unsuccessfully ended or just not ended, just unfinished.
Or artificially extended a lot of times. For example, with Naruto, where I think that there was an ending of Naruto that then got changed to create like a starting point for Boruto. And that's a lot of things as well.
It always comes back to Naruto.
I know, it does.
It always
really
comes back to Naruto.
But it's true that, either things get canceled and they never have the chance to reach that end, or they are artificially extended, or non-artificially extended, like One Piece just keeps going.
Yeah.
So and it's that's awesome, that's great. And then there's also other things where, in terms of adaptations, I think also a lot of you can wind up with things like The Promised Neverland season 2, and then it's that was artificially short, that was condensed to, it still ended up at the same point, but was just done
terribly,
so incredibly poorly that it turned into a slideshow. So that's not good either. And same with a lot of live action and Western shows. The TV format for TV shows used to just be keep going as long as possible.
Yeah.
And now we're in a Netflix era where things get canceled after 2 or 3 seasons because Netflix wants to move on to the bigger and better thing. So I feel like oftentimes it's this world of kind of extremes where things are either super long and never end, or end too
abruptly.
soon and abruptly. So to see something actually come to a point, and it's not even just it's also books, it's like a Game of Thrones kind of thing where sometimes authors just don't want to finish things, and kind of
Yeah, I feel like our society is kind of analogous to George R. R. Martin's brain. If you listen to George R. R. Martin talk about how he got to this point with the books, because it's been 12 years since the last book was published, something like that. The last book was published during season 1 of the show of Game of Thrones. And he talks about originally the plan was to make a trilogy like Lord of the Rings. And then he got to around book 2 and he's just this is going to take more than that. Maybe book 3 would be a 2-parter. No, maybe it's going to be 6 books. And what he ran into was he just kept building out the world. And originally there was going to be a big time skip in the middle, and it was going to age everybody up to normal ages. There were going to be, the reason everybody in the books of Game of Thrones is 12 and 13 or 10 or 9 is because there was going to be a 5-year time skip where they were going to be young adults and older teenagers, or, older than that. And, he kind of figured that skipping that much would be it didn't sit right with him. Once he sat down to write it, he just couldn't bring himself to just well, if all this stuff was going to happen, well, then why don't I just write it as if it's part of the story? Not understanding that, he's a mortal being and won't be able to finish all these things in his lifetime if he writes every action and every plot line and introduces an entire other noble family of the Martells into the whole thing. And I feel like that's kind of how we are as a culture, especially anime manga culture, feel about stories in general. So from the starting point with Attack on Titan, it's always going to an ending is always going to feel unnatural, from the beginning. So now, no matter what, it's always going to feel unnatural because it's so expansive and big. That's kind of the main point. Oh, Base Araki split his series in different parts so you can always end a story arc whenever he feels like it. Well, yeah, that's his solution to this problem of and that was something that he talked about that Araki with this talking about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure that he talked about in part 2 to part 3 in that transition when stands became a thing. He said that or I don't know if he fully said it, but it's clear that he felt the pressure of like power creep and of this, the Hammond being this crazy, energy blast. Dragon Ball is obviously running parallel. I'm pretty sure if I have my shit right. I'm not great with history. I famously said that One Piece was started in the early 80s or something, like a moron. But he felt that pressure of things sort of getting bigger and bigger and not having a kind of endpoint or like going in a direction. They're just getting larger and inflating. So what his solution to stay creative and stay interested in his work was to split things up in sort of an anthology series. But if you're going to write this like big crazy epic like Attack on Titan or like Game of Thrones, then having an ending in mind is important. And no matter what, especially just I think it's genuinely just like a symptom of our times that it's just sort of it feels unnatural. So that's the main thing. I saw somebody ask before about what our opinion was of Armin and Aaron's last conversation, and I feel like that's also a very big, if we're talking about like these big broad problems that people have. I think that people are severely overly critical of that part. And I talked about this in Discord. I talked about this with you, but it's something that I think a lot of people forgot, and I think a lot of I wasn't. The thing is, I wasn't a part of the manga community at the point when the ending happened. It seems like a lot of the manga readers were more pissed off than the anime watchers are currently. But it's funny to me because that to me was just clearly a comedy moment. It was clearly like the last funny thing that they were going to share with each other, and I think a lot of people took it way too seriously. I think that's the main thing. I think it was just a joke that didn't quite land for people, and it's very again, as far as like when I talked about consistency with the whole series, that conversation and Aaron breaking down, be like, "Oh, I just want her to love me," blah 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 blah, and being all pathetic. If you read the manga or paid attention, it was lessened in the anime, but it was still definitely there, especially season 3 onward. I noticed it a lot more. It's just Isayama's style of comedy. It's just the way that he always does. If you look back, I didn't have time, but I was going to pull up a bunch of examples of Isayama doing this throughout the whole series of the manga, where he, like, in very serious critical moments, just makes characters say the most off-the-cuff, unhinged, weird shit that you can say, and make crazy faces. Like, they twist their faces up and, like, raise up their eyebrows and does all this crazy shit. He does that all the time. They didn't do it almost at all in season 1. They toned it down a lot in season 1, where they didn't do the crazy faces and, like, the crazy reactions and stuff like that. Season 2, they did a little bit more. Season 3, they did a lot more, and it was a far more consistent with the manga's tone. And season 4, they still did a lot, but it was kind of lessened because because Mappa was trying to take a way more sort of dark approach to the visuals and everything. So there was less of it, but it was still always there. And it was especially when all the when like Sasha was eaten and stuff like that all the time, she would like have this crazy face, like she turned into a wild animal. That kind of stuff of characters like becoming like total tone shift and just like abrupt. That is like more Attack on Titan than anything else that happened in the finale. That's like so consistent with like in the most critical moments, like people will be literally dying, and then somebody will like grab the back of somebody's neck and like slam it into a pile of shit, or like laugh about and talking about how I'm gonna shit in your mouth or something like that. Like that's so that kind of like weird switch up is so intrinsically Attack on Titan. I think that for a lot of people, they felt like if they did notice that, if they did make that connection between that moment and other moments, they probably felt like it just wasn't the time to do it. But I think to Isayama, it was probably just the last time to do it. I think that it was, to him, it was like these characters aren't just the serious, world-saving Avengers people and like, evil Sigma Giga Chad guy. It's, these two people that he's created and these two kids that he's made friends with for the last 14 years, 15 years. And that's just his style, and it's incredibly consistent with everything else. Did it land for me? Did I like it as much? No, I don't. That style of joking wasn't always my cup of tea, but it's Isayama as an author coming through in his work, and I think that that at least needs to be acknowledged. And I think that that's the problem, is people are attributing it to, like, oh, why would Eren say this? Why are they talking like this? This is so weird. It's so inconsistent with his character. It's inconsistent with like the tone of the moment and the characters and the stakes of this scene and this situation, kind of. But it's very consistent with Isayama as an author and with how the story has been told up to this point. So that's kind of my opinion on it. Did I think it was super funny? No, when he broke down like that, but I at least know that it's consistent with the story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it also depends, like, if like you read the manga, so you know that is like a thing, but I think a lot of anime only people, it's just like really off-putting, because it's even for someone who like knows the like what he was going for or whatever, like that's just his style, it was still like not awesome to witness. So then for someone who like didn't associate that with Attack on Titan, then it does come off as just kind of like,
yeah, well, it's
okay.
funny because it seems like a lot of people who watch the anime are seemingly liking the ending a lot more because of that larva stage thing that I talked about, how Isayama, and from what I hear, and maybe I should have done more research on the specific releases of this, but he released like multiple pages after it was done. He like regretted the decision, went back and forth. He clearly struggled a lot. And it's very reminiscent of how he dealt with the Uprising arc and how he felt about the Uprising arc whenever he got into the more serious, long-term, overarching plot things, and like these this is the road that will end the series. He got very stressed out around that time, I know for sure, and I think that happened as well towards the end. So apparently the manga is a little bit more sloppy as far as people are aware, but I think most people just I think most people just don't like this series for the same reasons that Isayama likes it. I think that especially towards the end, I think that Isayama saw the series differently than a lot of people did, than maybe the majority of fans did. And I think that goes into the romance aspect as well, which we could get into. I think that, anyway, what did you want to say?
Someone was saying, this isn't like Eren is hilarious to me. Eren breaking down and being a whiny bitch is 2000% Eren. I also agree. It's like, Eren like screams and cries the entire time up until season 4, when he mysteriously suddenly is the coolest Sigma around, and then a bunch of people really thought of that as like the real Eren.
Yeah.
When he was just suppressing all of the other parts of him to like put up that as a front. So I think that's when people see him just being like normal or like with his best friend, then it comes across as like, oh, well, this is not the Eren that I just spent the last 3 years watching, because the final season has taken so long to come out, that Eren has been like that. Like, it's like you can, I'm going to binge all of the first 3 seasons. Okay, that's like a long time ago for me now. Yeah. And now for years,
you've had time to,
Eren.
You've had like people got into the series, I think around, season 3, episode 15, which is that the one Hero? Is that it? The one where Armin dies, like that was like the highest rated episode of television for a while. Like, I think so. There's twofold with that. With Eren's, people feel like Eren's, there's the whole character assassination. That's what's been thrown around a lot. And there's 2 ways to look at it. I think that people who are upset kind of have a reason to be upset, in a way, because they're because Isayama himself admitted that Eren was, as a main character, was just supposed to be like the main guy and not supposed, like, for the first like 2 or 3 seasons worth of content, he was just the guy who got angry. And, you know, Isayama, he says this in an interview where he's talking about like they ask like which character does he relate to, and I think in other interviews as well, which character like most represents him. And he says that like for a long time it was Armin, because Eren was just a guy and it was just the main character of my manga, but Armin was the person that he like kind of wrote himself into the story with. And then as season 4 went along, he said he related more to Eren. So that sort of transformation I think at the end of the Uprising arc to, you know, the taking back Shiganshina, that around that time is when the series kind of, Eren's character kind of crystallized. So for people to mistake, like, I think the idea of people sort of binging the first 3 seasons and then getting to like the real story of season 4's content and onwards, I think that like it's not 100% anyone's fault for like missing sort of the full arc of Eren's character, or like up to the point where he's like Sigma Giga Chad Eren. He like there's so much buildup that happens that is, I think, kind of missed or ignored by a lot of the people who look up to Eren when he's playing up the part of Chad Jaegerist Eren. And I think that doesn't, because a lot of people binge it, that's one component. And because Isayama wasn't putting as much focus on that part of the story as far as Eren's character in his own mind, I feel like that sort of implicitly comes through the work, and it influences the way that people sort of consume Eren's character. And then all of these things lead to them believing the lie, or not seeing it coming. Maybe it just worked on them. That's, I think, probably likely. And then they're ultimately surprised at the end, where they're like, I thought that this was like a progression of his character, and he like had a big switch and it was this big, I think they saw like him turning into Giga Chad Eren as like a big twist in the story. They were like, oh my God, he snapped. This is crazy. This is so cool. I feel like there's a lot of commentary that could be done about like modern masculinity and like how people relate and are interested in like the sort of literally me type thing. I feel like there's a lot of commentary that could go into that, but that might be a longer conversation. I feel like a lot of people look up to characters like that because they're just empowering, and it's not as pathetic as like a Kirito self-insert power fantasy type thing, but it's a little bit more deep than that, because it's like this people, a dejected sort of underdog guy that suffers and tries to do the right thing and tries to do the right thing and tries to do the right thing and like tries to accommodate everybody and tries to be the leader. The freedom of having the power that when you let go of that you can forge your own path and go your own way and just like fuck everybody else. I'm done with this. I'm done like playing your games. I'm the leader. I'm the alpha male. I'm the Giga Chad. I'm the Sigma. I'm the Giga Chad. I forge my own path, and I'm going to do what I think is right. I trust myself. This is my path. This is my power, and I'm going to do what I think is right. I'm not going to worry about all the little yapping in the background, all you people trying to tell me what to do, all this pressure trying to force me down one lane. I'm going my own way, and I'm taking you all with me because that's my right as like, I think it's a power fantasy, but it's like, I think people get wrapped up in that, but it's more than just like, oh, I have cool power. I'm badass isekai MC who's just like super overpowered. When it's born out of this like suffering and this desire to do good and be better, and seeing somebody like that take control, I think is very empowering to people. Anyway. But all of that is, to me, because I think maybe because I value the first 3 seasons a lot more than the last season, the season 4 content, final season onwards, and all the specials and everything. I really value Eren's character at that point, and I really saw And maybe it's because I reread the manga a million times before season 4 came out, and I rewatched the anime. I probably have rewatched seasons 1 to 3. I've probably rewatched season 1 of Attack on Titan like 20 times by myself. Because I was a fan during that like 4 or 5 year period between seasons 1 and 2 when there was nothing else. There was Attack on Titan Junior High, and Cabaneri of the Iron Fortress came out instead. And I was just so into it. I was reading the manga, and I would just rewatch the anime and listen to the OST. I was such a huge fan at that point. I was like, I don't know, 19, 20, 18, something like that. And it really struck a chord with me. So like my experience of Eren is very rooted in like in that earlier juncture, and not in and like him suffering and crying and having a breakdown and being, you know, feeling powerless all the time. That's his main thing, is he feels powerless all the time. And that's the Eren that I related to and that I sort of got immersed in. So when I saw him be all like Giga Chad, to me that was like so it was a lot more obvious to me, I think, than other people that he was and you can go back and watch our reaction. We kind of suspected something from the beginning,
especially in that conversation where he tells Armin and Mikasa that he hates them and like doesn't care about them or whatever. I feel like that like if you've been paying attention to his character, he kind of had two things, and it was, one, he wants to kill all the Titans, and two, he wants to like save his friends, basically.
Yeah.
Like those are his two things that he cares about. So for him to just suddenly say, fuck Armin and Mikasa, I don't care about you at all, I'm gonna just go commit genocide. I feel like watching that and relating that moment back to Eren from seasons 1 to 3, you can kind of see that he's obviously doing, he has some plan, and he is doing bad things, but he's not just this like, he doesn't care about anyone. He's like a lone wolf. He's going off by himself because he thinks that it's a cool thing to do, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
that's a very one-dimensional, and it's a very one-dimensional view of Eren's motivation, and it clearly comes from to me it's so clear that it comes from, you know, so much of the series exploded. Like, it was already the biggest series ever, but it exploded so much when but just in the gap between season 3 and 4, and when season 4 came out, it became like a huge phenomenon, and TikTok came around and it became like a big thing. And so sharing anime became a big deal on that. So this new generation had come in that gap between seasons 3 and 4. And, you know, there was just so much, it was such a huge shift. It was such a big boon to everything. And I think a huge portion of viewers just, one, it's their first anime for most people, is probably their first manga, like it was for me. And, they binged through the first 3 seasons, all the buildup, and then so they see Eren as kind of like a wimpy, sort of relatable guy, and then he goes Sigma mode, and then that's relatable and badass, and they get attached to that. Mm-hmm. And then James Gunn,
thank you for the donation.
Thank you for the super chat. Said maybe you should have been around in the manga community before the final chapter. Every theory was Eren was going to 100% genocide and kill all his friends and live happily with Historia and his baby, Kino. We could talk a bit about the Historia stuff, and we could talk a little bit about the romance things. I have a lot to say about like the romance aspect of the series. But I think that one small thing before getting into anything else, the idea that a Japanese story was going to be about with a disaster plot ending, as every series has been for the last 30 or so years. All these big, you know, if you notice in anime, it's very common to have like, oh, at the end of it, it's like we reach the root of this power and everything, you know, there's some huge disaster, and out of that comes like the solution to this problem. It's a lot of people have talked about disaster fiction and its relationship to Japan. And I think that it's very poignant here, that, you know, I think that it relates to Japan's history with, obviously there's a lot more with Japanese sort of culture that is baked into Attack on Titan that I think a lot of Western people, a lot of global viewers don't see when they look at it. But the fact that they're, you know, this isolationist island country is you know, once invaded this country and then retreated back and sealed all of its borders, and then has to like re-enter the world. That's very consistent with Japanese history of World War II. And, you know, there's this crazy big disaster that happens, and out of that comes this crazy boom of technology. That's also consistent with Japan's history with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They crazy big war. It ends with two giant explosions, this disaster that just rocks the whole country. And then after that, there needs to be some sort of interplay. Things aren't fixed. The world isn't fixed. There's still conflict, but the peace treaty was signed, and we're moving forward. And then Japan eventually has a huge boom in technology, and their economy flourishes in the 80s. And they become the leaders in robotics and digital technology. All the video games come from Japan. All bunch of vehicles and TVs and all the technology that we used for a long time. They were said to be like 10, 15 years ahead of the Western world in terms of technology. So out of this, there's this sort of this cultural story that was born from all of that. If you look at their history, that is very present in Attack on Titan and present in a lot of different anime where there's a big disaster. There for a long time, these cultures were at war, and this, you know, imperialist nation sealed itself off, and we're just being attacked from all sides because of the sins of our past. Are we good? Are we bad? And then eventually the war breaks out, and big disaster happens, and we have to, you know, re-enter the world. And you know, you see that in Attack on Titan, and so the idea that the answer in this story with this cultural framework was likely going to be, and, you know, I'm not reducing Isayama to just a product of his culture 100%. I'm not saying that everything is that simple, that everything that everything can be answered by this one situation that I'm talking about. But it's context that I think is very important. That they, you know, that the answer was just going to, and just in storytelling in general, like that the answer was going to be, you know, I think that the answer is just going to be genocide. I think that a lot of people I think a lot of people are young, like I was when I got into it, and like I still kind of am. I think that a lot of people want easy answers, and I think that a lot of people, like, that's what people were looking for.
I think it's also a lot of people who, like, are Jaegerists who do wish that every single person in the whole world got genocided. I think that a lot of these people, yeah, they are young, and they think that any type of like sympathy or empathy towards other people is like a weak thing, or it's too idealistic. I saw a comment on, I think it was on TikTok somewhere, and someone said it should have been a total genocide ending, but to be like politically correct, you can't show that genocide solves problems because
because Japan is so politically correct.
But the whole thing is like, it's like, oh, all these things that have genocide as an option but they don't do it are just like being weak. They're chickening out, even though the real answer is that would work and that would solve everything. And I think that these people are just kind of being edgy and think that, the world is too dark and twisted, and you know, people just don't want to face the truth, that it would be better if everyone just died, like that kind of thing. Like people think, they look at a story like this and they say, it didn't end in a complete world genocide because the author was too scared to put his real views that everyone should die out there. But then not kind of paying attention to the thing of like, maybe it's because that's not the message, like that's not a good message, and that's
I think saying it's not a good message is like kind of proving their point in a way.
I guess what I'm saying is that the theme of Attack on Titan is like everyone fighting in their own way, and like Eren was doing what he was needed to do, but then there's still other people that don't want that, and they're gonna fight too. Like the scouts, they stop Eren because that's what they are fighting for, a world that isn't, you know, genocided, and they end up winning. But the whole thing is that if Eren gets to fight as hard as he wants, and then other people fight for something else and they beat him, then like like that's kind of fair too. You know what guess you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think that somebody said like it brought the series once it got into season 4 stuff kind of brought out a lot of the politics in people. And yeah, I said this like I think I said at some point in season 4 throughout season 4 when we like were first doing the reactions in like 2020, but it was so it's very like as you start analyzing stories, like I thought this as well when I was watching Game of Thrones season 7 or whatever, when like I would watch a lot of reactions to Game of Thrones season 7 and the whole series, but when Daenerys is like there's the loot train attack or what it was called, where she's flying with the Dothraki and she's got on her dragon, she burns all the carriages and she's roasting people alive, and then I'm just watching these reactions, these like group reactions, people like cheering, and then I'm like, wait, why are they're cheering? And then I look at like I just kind of pay attention to the tone of the scene. I'm like, yeah, this is victorious. Like, why are they? It just feels so against like the whole, especially Game of Thrones series, where like war is not this glorious thing to have, so once you start looking at it like that, then I looked at Attack on Titan the same way when Eren was like, when the whole battle of, what's the city called where Eren like infiltrated and he was like hobo Eren.
Yeah.
When he did all that shit, and everyone was like excited and cheering, like, yeah, fuck him up, Eren. And I'm just like, I feel like they just were not paying attention to the huge reveal that just happened. Like it just introduced this crazy, complicated moral problem, and now Eren has become the monster that he wanted to destroy, and everyone's cheering like it's a good thing. And I never understood that. And I see some people saying like, oh, that's not the problem that a lot of people have with the ending. I feel like I feel like it is. I feel like a lot of people. I feel like a lot of people put their problems with the ending onto a lot of other words and things, and a lot of other like reasons why, oh, this didn't fit, that didn't fit. I think the big thing that it comes down to is that I think that they had a misunderstanding of the whole story. Personally, that's my view. Maybe that's like elitist to say or something. And it is a little bit reductive. There's clearly more to it than that, and the ending's not perfect. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying it's the ultimate thing. I think that some things could have been cleaned up a lot, but I think a lot of people focused on different things than this is what I'm saying. Like Isayama focused on, I had a different idea of the story than they did, and at the very end they were just left unsatisfied because of that, and because of the whole like endings in general just being unsatisfied or unsatisfying in general. But what was I saying about? Shit, what was I saying? Fuck, I forget what I was saying. Rewind me back like a couple minutes. What were you saying?
I was talking about how there's like people fighting on both sides, and how
it's not. Oh yeah, this is what I was gonna say earlier. It's not easy. I feel like the people who wanted like a genocide ending were also very obsessed with like, this series is dark. This is dark.
That's what I was trying to say. Of like,
and they wanted like. These problems are complicated, and they're questions. I don't think that Isayama. I think that a lot of people eventually got the idea that like it was so built up. This series is so huge that I think a lot of people, and I talked about this in Discord as well when I was talking about it. I think that a lot of people saw this as like the potential, like, oh, this series is larger than life. The entire world's attention is on is dealing with these really complicated issues, and what's the answer going to be? How's this all going to turn out? And I think that a lot of people forgot that this was just being written by like one guy in his 20s, and it's isn't this I don't think it's a seinen. I'm pretty sure it's a shonen. It's classified technically as a shonen, unless I'm wrong. Don't get me wrong. Maybe I'm wrong, and I think that a lot of people built it up as this like holy scripture, this like infallible text that was going to like provide new philosophy or a new view on morality and war and how to solve suffering, and they were going to get some kind of magic answer. And I think a lot of people, and especially Western viewers, because so much of our culture is very politically and socially motivated these days. It's a lot of the people in the entertainment industry are really trying to promote ideas that they think are good for society. That's kind of like the main objective of a lot of the people who are creating media in the Western world, especially like the larger series. And I think that a lot of people in the Western world look to anime as because it's so different, it's so novel as a concept and in its storytelling, that people see it as like an opportunity. It's like, oh, there's this different thing, and they see things different, and maybe there's something else here. Maybe they have a different answer. And I think that the idea that conflict just keeps going and one person can't stop it, and all they can do is live for the people around them and try their best, and potentially die for the things that they believe in, is unsatisfying, because this is supposed to be, Eren was supposed to like solve the problem. And I think that because everything is, again, going back to like everything being so socially and politically motivated over here, the idea that this series from this different place, written by somebody who's like different than the people who are writing my stories where I'm from, over here, maybe they'll take a chance and do something like that I've never seen before. Like, what if the answer is this thing that nobody would ever dare to do over in this place where everybody's so concerned with all these social and political issues? What if, they go like really like edgy with it, but like, I don't think they view it like that, but it's like, what if they take the chance and like, what if the answer is something that nobody would expect and that would really like wow me and shock me and like would just be so crazy.
Expose the dark truth of the world. That, like that I guess what you're saying is what I was trying to say. It's like they want the show. They are like wanting it to be dark because it's like it's new or it's different, or they think that like, oh, this is the chance for like my like darker ideas to be like realized in
and the funny thing is Isayama directly in the ending, I mean, maybe I don't know what was added and what was not in that conversation between Eren and Armin, because a lot of stuff was added, a lot of stuff was like reshaped or something. I didn't go back and read the manga, but he says it in fuck, I'm losing my train of thought so many times. They both share the thought of like, oh yeah, Armin, or even Armin is like, I would have wanted, a part of me wanted it too. It's like, that's a clear acknowledgement of like the darker side and like the selfish nature of humanity that is present even in them, even in Armin, who is like supposedly fighting for the survival of the species and the survival of the remaining people left on Earth. He's on the side of good, and he is.
But there's still a part of him.
He still absolutely relates to Eren, and that's the duality that is present also in Eren. And a lot of people had problems with the thing I mentioned was added in the anime. Okay, well, I don't know about that. Anyway, either way, I think that it fits very well.
Someone donated like a while ago. Could you go find it?
Ewan Polgar. The anime manga brought out a political side of his fandom. The Jaegerists very much reflect their individual way. Oh yeah, I mentioned this. Thank you, Ewan Polgar, longtime viewer. Thank you very much. What were we saying?
Just that we're talking a little bit about with how Armin like admitted to relating to Eren as well, and I think that kind of comes back around to the whole like it had to the whole like, oh, the future and past are happening at the same time and there's no other way, and how Eren says like this is happening because he's an idiot that got power. Yeah. And basically what I take that to kind of mean, it's like this is all happening because it's predetermined, but it's only predetermined because it's Eren. And if someone else was in the same position as Eren and had the same power as Eren, and it had somehow gone different somewhere along the line that it didn't wind up being him, then there could have been another solution. But because of who Eren is and his core beliefs and values, then that is why there was no other way. It's not because it's just physically impossible in any sense for there to have been another way. It's just because it was him, there was no other way.
It goes back, you know what it goes back to? Perfect setup for this is when Armin was dying and he was burnt to a crisp, and they were arguing about who to give Bertolt's Titan power to and who to save. Eren said like, I think when he was making an argument for like why Armin is so special. It's like, all of us, we only think of like destruction. The only thing I think of is like killing the Titans, and I think about the death of my mom. But Armin, he thinks about positive things. He thinks about saving people, about life, about exploration, about all these kids. I forget the quote exactly. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but that kind of goes into this as well, where, you know, Eren, because he at his core, you know, even when he's a little kid, is like kind of fucked up. Like he's killing people and, you know, self-defense, but like, you know, like it's meant to be kind of freaky. And I think that's the idea, is that because everything all of time for Eren, and in that end conversation with Armin, everything's happening at once throughout. I think it's supposed to be from the time of his death to the time where he got the Titan powers, and he fought against it for like most of the time since the medal ceremony to like when he got the power originally. He was always trying to fight against it, but every time he did, he just couldn't help it. Like it's because it was in the end, like once you get it, and then you get access to all of time happening at once, it's like, well, the initial first thing was guided by your own core values and your core feeling. So that's always going to win, whether you want, you know, it's already happened and is happening currently. And I think that idea of determinism, people didn't like that. I could tell people didn't like that even like for all of season 4, whenever we would talk about like, oh, it wasn't all of season 4. It was when we got maybe the last special we were talking about that, and people were arguing about like, well, you know, the idea that he's, you know, everything is predetermined is kind of bullshit. Well, you can argue about whether it's bullshit or not, but it was clear kind of for a long time. Like if you look back at the whole series, it seemed to be that Isayama had it in his head that determinism was going to like play out at some point in the series. If you go back and like kind of look at everything, a lot of people don't seem to like that Eren had his agency taken away. But like everybody had their agency taken away, and everybody didn't.
Everyone, yeah,
it's both.
That's the whole thing. It's everyone did and didn't, because everyone is still making choices, even if it was predetermined. It was only predetermined because they were always going to make the choices that they made. They weren't making choices, like in contrast to their character. It was predetermined because they were doing exactly what they like had to do, compelled by themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like Eren was doing what he had to do because that was what he as Eren had to do. Armin was doing what he had to do, and Mikasa and everyone was doing what they had to do based on their own selves. They weren't just Eren wasn't just like puppeteering all of them, and they all just weren't, you know, they weren't all just doing nothing. They weren't all just acting because it was completely against what they wanted to do, but they were being forced to do it. That was kind of the whole thing, and that's why, you know, Eren being a slave to fate, or Eren, you know, being forced to do certain things. It's like he was and he wasn't. He was forced to do those things by himself. Yeah,
just like how he went back and forced his dad to do things retroactive. It's like the only reason Eren was in the position he was because Grisha did that
in the first place.
But he was actually behind it. It's this cyclical thing, and it's, you know, it doesn't really matter. It was, I think it was a cool twist to have him go back and do that, but like the nature of him going back and doing that to Grisha and all of the things where he influenced in the past, you know, the nature of all of it is that it already happened. So like by its very nature of having that, it's classic time travel causality loop paradox. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, this is Back to the Future level stuff right here. Like it already happened. So like Eren's not actually changing anything. It's not actually a big reveal that he went back and told his dad to do that, or that he was like interacting with the past via these paths, because it already happened. So, you know, nothing's actually changed. He's not changing the past.
Exactly. It's like in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, when they use the time turner, and then so it's like they're all in Hagrid's hut, and then then a rock comes in and hits Harry in the head. And then they're like, oh shit, and then they look out the window and they're like, oh shit, we gotta go.
Yeah.
And then later, when they're in the time loop, then they're like, oh no, you guys, we aren't leaving. What's the problem? And then they see the rock and then they throw it. And it's like, did that happen because they threw the rock, but it happened the first time? So it's like a,
it's because everything's happening at once.
Yeah.
It's a circle. I don't know. I think that people just don't like that kind of story. I think that people just don't like determinism. They don't like that was introduced. They liked it when it was cool and Eren was a badass, but they don't like it's with going back to like Eren kind of breaking down in that moment and being like, oh my God, I love Mikasa. People not liking that and feeling that's not consistent, and him like freaking out like that is not consistent with his character. Which people are saying that that's like not everybody. I think that it's a bigger subset of the community than I think that you guys are giving credit for. We get comments from people, from hundreds of people, thousands of people every day, and we read almost all, like not all the ones that are from shit that's going to spoil us, but we read like so many of these things, and it's a huge portion. And again, we are only a subset of the overall community, so it's a biased subsample there. Anyway. I think that people just don't like that idea. I think that people are frustrated by that because I think a lot of people look to stories because they feel they might, and especially the people who might relate to Eren and are leaning more into the whole power fantasy angle. I think that another reason why they might be more disappointed is because the reason they came to this series and the reason why they go to stories is to escape the like lack of control they might feel in their normal life. That's a normal thing that like almost everybody does. So to get to a story where a character is taking control only to realize that he didn't have it feels like you gave me this thing where I felt like I was in control and now I don't have, and then you just revealed that I'm just a little bitch. I just have nothing and I'm crying over some girl. Like what the hell is this? I came here to escape that crushing reality of life that, this is way too real in a real way. Okay, now let's get into the Eren didn't love Mikasa, everybody, all this stuff. This is something that I have a pretty long-winded view on, as many things that I do. I think that this comes from a different interpretation that Isayama had with the story. There's a couple things. It's not this simple. I think it comes from a different interpretation that the vast majority of viewers had versus what Isayama thought in the story. Because Isayama has a complicated relationship with writing romance, clearly. If you look at all of the romantic subplots in the story, not just Eren Mikasa, so many of them are argued whether they even exist. Like so much of the romance in Attack on Titan, when is there other than Eren Mikasa, what other clear these two characters love each other? There was like that one couple when they were cadets and that guy got chopped in half or got bit in half by Titans. That was like the only time, and Eren's parents, like that, and even they weren't super close. Every romantic connection, you might think like, oh, what other ones? There's and this might border into people thinking that I'm like a shipper. I'm not a shipper type person, but these things are, they're subtextual, they're implicit, they're not explicitly explored in the story, which is why maybe a lot of people might have missed them. There's if you remember that Captain Ian and his crush on Mikasa and him like kind of sacrificing himself so that Mikasa could save Eren. He clearly like had a crush on her.
Jean clearly had a crush on
Mikasa from like the first moment.
I feel like it's interesting because I feel like they made...
There's Ymir and Historia.
Yeah, Ymir and Historia.
There's Historia and Eren, which they had like kind of a closer bond. There's Reiner and Historia, but obviously that's very one-sided. It's more of a crush and it's kind of a joke.
Bertolt and Annie.
But that was again more clear.
I feel like the more
Eren and Annie is another one that's very overlooked before like the whole Armin and Annie thing was a thing. There in season 1, the reveal that Annie was the female Titan and that she was like a traitor. There was a scene of Eren and Annie like kind of talking and like hanging out, and when Annie transforms into a Titan, she's like looking at Eren specifically, with like fear and like conflict in her eyes, and it's very clear, and they're looking at each other, and Aaron like so desperately wants to believe, not just because they're friends, but I think because there was an implicit sort of a little more of a connection there when they're fighting in their titans in the forest. You can see that in their expression, in Annie's expression specifically. They're like, there's clearly more of an interaction there than just their comrades or something. Mm-hmm. Eventually, it's more of Armin and Annie that get explored more thoroughly towards the end of the series. But I that's one connection there. A lot of people, on the one last thing on the Ymir Historia thing, it is so not explicit that one of the Ymir and Historia is one of the most explicitly romantic, in my opinion, connections in the whole story. Yet a huge, almost the majority of the fan base contests whether it was even real. And when the whole point to me of the tragedy of their relationship is that when his Historia moving on and like getting married to a man, even though that she was like in love with, and Ymir and her were in love clearly. And to me, that was very clear. But it's still so contestedly argued. So my overall point is there's so many little romantic subplots and little romantic connections, and people when they're dying, they like say this person's name with their last breath as the Titan clamps down on them or something. And it's like, oh my God, the tragedy of that. They actually loved each other the whole time. That was a consistent thing, again, like with the whole like Isayama crazy face thing. So my point with all of this is that romance is so subtextual and beneath the surface, and then when it's and if you look back on it was clear to everybody that Mikasa loved Eren, but it was less clear, I think, because of Isayama's relationship to romance, that he didn't put as much emphasis as people would have liked. And I think that that's kind of fair in this case. I think that in other things, it's like, I think that it's kind of the audience's fault for not picking up on like what Isayama was trying to set up and like the clear foreshadowing that he was doing. I think in this case, he just has a very complicated relationship with writing romance. And I think to him, it was probably pretty clear from the start that they were going to end up with that kind of connection. But because he doesn't focus on that, he doesn't put any pressure on that sort of side of things, other than Mikasa obviously being super in love with Eren. Eren is like always has something to prove. He's like constantly pushing her away because he is supposed to protect her. That's like his thing. Is his mom, like one of the last like big conversations they had was like, Eren, you have to take care of Mikasa. You have to protect her. And then it like in the anime it like zooms in on his face like all like crazy. And he clearly took that to heart, and that's something that he carried with him through the rest of his life. And so the Mikasa to Eren, that's pretty clear to everybody. Eren to Mikasa, I think, was cleverly hidden, a little bit too cleverly, because he hid it cleverly, and then he didn't do the other thing where he like foreshadows it enough for most people to like get that that's where it was going. And I think that, how many romantic like kiss moments, compare it to other series where like, there's a long drawn out romance, and then by the end of it they like end up together. Usually there's a little bit more tension, and like people can kind of get that. I think to Isayama it was probably there for a long time, if not from the beginning, but eventually once you get to the very end, it felt abrupt to a lot of people, because Isayama, I don't think, built it up as much as people would have liked to, like, I think that's the Armin and Annie connection was there in season 1, but not much. I don't know, could have done better. I think that the reason that's why I went back to the Eren and Annie thing is because I think that in season 1, it was more Eren's infatuation with Annie, and like seeing her, like she's also strong like Mikasa, but there's not all this baggage. She's like this new girl. She like knows how to fight. He's like learning from her. She's clearly very attracted to like his headstrong nature, and like always looks up to him being like a, not being afraid to go against the grain, which is what she always wished she could do in Marley and, in her life in general. But also she envies that, having the strength to do that, but she doesn't have the strength to do that, which is why she just goes with the flow and why she wished she could just be a normal person. They have this interplay, and there's a very complicated nature of their relationship. And I think that was more built up between Eren and Annie because of her betrayal. And Armin and Annie was kind of was more focused on later in the series because of, you know, just the way things evolved. But I think that's why Armin and Annie wasn't focused on as much in the early juncture. Sorry, I cut you off. I wanted to get to my thing.
Yeah, sorry. Pretty much what I have to say now is almost irrelevant because it was when we were talking about how the like how there are a lot of unrequited love or unrequited interest at the very least in the show, and I think that the more like there are the more like there was a lot more, it was a lot more overt when it was completely unrequited, like with in like season 1 when Jean is like really into Mikasa, that is extremely obvious. And same with how Bertolt to Annie and Reiner to Historia, like Reiner's like sniffing the letter from Historia even in the final season, or like in the like he like verbally expresses like how he thinks that she's beautiful or is in love with her, like she's gonna be my wife one day or something. Doesn't he say something like that? So it's like I feel like it's interesting because I feel like at that early point there was a lot of like expression of that, but in more of like a joking or like a trivial way, because I think also a lot of that comes down to the characters like over time, like they're in like a life or death situation. What?
Just move it closer to your.
It's like.
Just move it close to your mouth. That's all I'm saying.
The characters are like in a life or death situation, so it makes sense that even if people did have feelings for each other, they maybe wouldn't act on it because of just the world that they're living in, because it's not really worth it to get tied up in something like that when like the other person could be dead the next day. And I think that plays into it, but I do agree that I think especially like some people have said that the anime did cut out like some moments of Eren like being nice to Mikasa or very much expressing that he does care about her. And I feel like that is like the one thing that it's like in the end I do believe that he loved her, but I feel like there could have been like a little bit more along the way to like really nail down what kind of love that was as well, like
100%,
because obviously he loved her and he loved Armin, like they were family, like they were his best and closest friends. And I think that there could have been a little bit more to add to like the romantic aspect of his love towards her.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's a big thing. I think it's just I think it's just clearly, you know, again, like I never said the ending was perfect. And that's one reason why it's not, is that like, you know, if the majority of people, even me at that, like when it happened, when there was like clearly the romance being like kind of, it felt like it was kind of shoehorned. In reflection, it's clear to me, like with all of my knowledge of like all the romance subplots that were gone kind of like without much notice, you know, I think that, you know, even I was caught by surprise by it, but I do think upon reflecting, I think that it does fit with like what Isayama probably thought of the series. Mm-hmm. It just didn't fit with what he put out, because there's, you know, writing a story is just another form of communication at the end of the day. It's like, you know, it's just using the medium of these characters to say something, and it's just words on a page at the end of the day. So it's like when you talk about something to somebody and they like completely mishear you or like completely misunderstand and they get like pissed off about what you said or something when you didn't even have that intention. It's the same thing. It's just a misunderstanding. And I think that there's some misunderstandings when you're talking to somebody and they either actively aren't listening, or they're thinking about something from their own life or something. It's, you know, they weren't paying as much attention to the conversation as you were. But there's also times where you could have worded things a little bit differently and you could have, you know, got across what you wanted to get across a little bit better. And I think that that's kind of the case here, where it's not that he completely, like, he went on a crazy tirade and like told a crazy story and nobody had any idea what the fuck he was talking about once he got to the end of the story and the punchline didn't fully land. I think that there's a balance there. I think that there's some things that he could have done a lot better, and I think that by his own admission, he could have done a lot better. And I think that there's some things that people just they focused on the wrong part of the story, whether it be because of how they consumed the story, because of just happenstance of the time that they got into the series, or their own life and what they value in a story is just different than what Isayama values. And then that doesn't really matter when the story is so wide, it's so large, and it's so expensive, and there's so much going on, there's so many characters, there's so much different things to focus on. And but once you taper that down into a final point where everything needs to end somewhere, and it's not going to end 50 different ways, it's going to end one way, and that way is going to put a sort of button on all of the questions that in one way or another is going to put a button on all of the conversations on the philosophy. You can sort of read out of the way that things sort of come to a head what the author thought about everything, and you can disagree with it, but it just, you can't change it. There's no room for headcanon in an ending. There's no room for your interpretation, generally speaking. I think that Isayama kind of wanted to keep that alive, which is why he did the sort of extra little ending of like the future and then everything crumbles and gets nuked. I think that, having a little bit more room for interpretation there, I think helps the story a lot. I think that it helps a lot of people feel a little bit more okay with things kind of coming to a head like that. Introducing another possibly 2,000 extra years of development in this world, and like what could have happened there, like just that question of like what went on in all those times, like letting people sort of focus on that who are feel that like determinism and putting an end on things and like having things end in this way, feeling unsatisfied with that. At least you can kind of get lost in the what ifs of this crazy other extra epilogue moment, and like what else is happening here. Is Aaron's head actually going to turn into like another whatever that fucking worm thing is called, or is it going to, is it actually not in there, it's just a tree or whatever, that having those questions of, is everything actually going to repeat itself, or did they actually put an end to this part of history, or all of these questions. I think that adding that little thing makes it feel a little bit more okay for people to arrive somewhere. Because I think again, going back to what we talked about at the start, it's like a lot of people just don't like the idea of an ending, of a concrete it's over, there's no room for you to think something different because the story went this way. I think that's like, but I had all these ideas about like Aaron being with Historia and their baby, and the whole Titan curse and like the 13 years, and is he going to be reborn into her baby, or are they going to like, it was actually his baby, or is he going to genocide the whole world? You can't ask that question once he just doesn't once it doesn't come to pass, and once it doesn't happen. So at some point theorizing about it is what they liked more than like what the story that Isayama was trying to tell. They were in their version of the world, and this isn't just this fan base or this story. It's everything, and it's why I think a big reason why, maybe one of the big reasons why, again, go back to George R. R. Martin, that he feels unsatisfied ending his series and like stopping, and just not continuing. Yeah. Anyway. Is anyone really mad because it ended? I think that people say that they're upset at why it ended, or this reason, or that reason, or what have you. But I think the real reasons are behind that. I think that, yeah.
Yeah, I like the interpretation of, I feel like this ending is more hopeful this time because the boy is freely exploring with his dog instead of being hunted. The Titan power is only manifested out of Ymir's fear. I think that is, like, I think that some people, like, I've seen a lot of people and their interpretations of the ending. I think that some people just completely were literally not even paying attention, because I've seen some people that think that the like bombs that were going off were Titans coming back somehow. I've seen other people who seem to think that somehow, even though we saw them all grow old and die, that everyone that like we knew got bombed at the end, which doesn't really make any sense. But I do think that the final thing of everything, like rises, falls, gets destroyed, blah blah blah, goes on and on and on, and then the kid comes there at the end. I think that is like that is what you're meant to think about, is like, is the world like moving in a direction of, it's like how we talk about how Aaron, the things happened the way they did because Aaron and who he was and what he was motivated by got power. And then it's like, what if this other person, if someone else got that and they were motivated by something different, like how Ymir got the Titans because she was scared and she was running from these dogs and she was getting chased and she needed a way to defend herself, and then like the Titans were born out of that. And if someone is freely exploring and not motivated by anything in particular necessarily, are they going to find, it's like, you know, and
is history going to repeat itself, or is this the chance for a better future?
Exactly.
And that's the choice that like each character has to make throughout the whole thing with great sacrifice. And it's what Armin talks about in season 1 and what many people talk about throughout the whole series. The whole like Shinzo Sasageo, that's like, give your heart. Will you give your heart for humanity? Will you sacrifice yourself despite not knowing if it will make a difference because you have faith in the future? Or like, will you sacrifice yourself for a better future, or is that worth it to you? Armin says like at the very beginning, like Annie's just like, are you are you prepared to die? Or like, I'm not prepared to die for, you know, the government or for humanity or whatever, because obviously she's undercover. But she asks, I think she asks like Connie, and then Connie's like, fuck no, or something. And then Armin's just like, I mean, if I really think it would make a difference, yeah, I would. And eventually that comes to pass where he sacrifices himself for the greater good. And he knows it, and that's foreshadowing his death, but it's also just saying, it's making a point about life in general that the story is making. And it's sharing an opinion and making, and it's a theme throughout the whole thing. And Erwin in his last march does the same shit in his final speech to everybody as they're like riding off to their fucking deaths. He says, you know, his whole speech is about that. It's just like, did our comrades' lives, can you get my coffee off the counter? Or did our comrades' lives like mean nothing because they died? It's like, no, they mean something because we honor their memory by following in their footsteps and sacrificing ourselves too and going down this thing. That wasn't just some speech to get everybody fired up. That's why he did it in the moment, I suppose, to get everybody on board with his plan. But that speech encapsulates like the whole fight for peace. It's like Erwin was like the scout. He was constantly forging the path forward, trying to move forward, sacrificing people around him, eventually sacrificing himself multiple times. And it was all for the greater good. And I think a lot of people also feel like that's a very hollow and shallow sort of motivation, or a shallow sort of theme. They feel like, oh, what is this fucking Naruto talk no jutsu type shit? The reason why, you know, shonen stories in general, whether it's Naruto or Demon Slayer or whatever it is, the reason why they focus on, like, they're also like the same, or they sort of all tell the same stories, is because that's the human story. That's the story. That's the story that we all have to live with as mortal beings. Is, you know, that's kind of what life is about. We're not going to live forever. We're not, unless you're a fucking complete psychopath. You're going to have to live with people. We're social creatures. We have to live amongst people. We have to constantly be fighting and toying with this interplay between war and peace. This you know, what is it? You know, are we going to fight for what we believe in at the expense of others, or are we going to sacrifice ourselves for something? Like, we're eventually all going to die. What are we going to die for? What are we going to live for? These ideas are all, you know, the reason why shonens always touch on the same thing is because that's the human story. That's the story that we all have to deal with. You know, we're not going to live forever. Eventually, the next generation is going to have to take over. And, you know, it might feel a little bit simple, or like maybe the story should have been about something more, but that's what it's all about. That's what all the stories are about. They're all, I think it was Tolkien. I forget if he was quoting somebody or if he said this. I think he was quoting somebody else. And I forget who said it, but all stories are about death. All stories are about like the fear of death. And that's, you know, it's the same thing here. Oh, you got my coffee? Watch the yes, we watched all the OVAs.
Actually, Are some of them on our Patreon? Did we do them for Patreon?
Some of them.
Yeah. Should we talk about Flock? Someone just asked about him, and then
Do you want to talk about Flock? You have anything more to say about Flock? I feel like, to me, Flock is a well-written character, but again, the reason why I dogged on him so much and why we dogged on him so much wasn't because he was like such a terrible character, or that he didn't make sense of the story, or that he was dumb. He was a fully understandable, very well-developed, interesting character that I think, again, people just fully misunderstood. People just fully drank the Kool-Aid on all the Jaegerist shit, even though Eren was obviously playing a part, even though it was all clearly for a greater ends that even Eren at that point probably didn't fully understand how, deterministic everything was. He still thought you could change things. It was just a means to an end. And people bought into it way too much because they didn't see it coming. And then, they hold up Flock like he's a fucking king, and at this point it's just a meme, like how everybody hates Gabby, which I never understood. How do people hate Gabby? That's a different conversation. Flock, I feel like, is vastly misunderstood by some people, by most people, really. People who hate him and people who love him. And what he represents to me is the tragic case of an ideologue who is drank the Kool-Aid way too much on their ideal and cares less about human life than they do about perpetuating their own perpetuating their own ideology. And the reason that they're doing that is because of their own trauma and the things that they've gone through. So it's fully understandable and very human. But I don't think people see it that deeply. I think most people just see him as same reason why they relate to Eren. He's he's a Giga Chad. He tried to help everybody out. He tried to be the good boy, but the world burned him so much that eventually he just said, "Fuck that! I'm doing what needs to be done," and then that's cool to them. That's kind of my opinion on Flock. What's your opinion on Flock?
Yeah, I think that he was easy. I think while watching, he got kind of easy to hate on because it seemed like the people who were so obsessed with Chad Aaron were using Flock as Aaron was their self-insert, but also Flock was even more relatable somehow, I think, in a lot of ways because of how devoted he was. And I think that Flock is kind of sad, honestly, because he died fighting for what he believed in, but also what Aaron believed in. And he was basically just a tool for Eren to get to the point that he needed to get to so that everyone else could come and stop him. It's just, I don't know. He's just kind of a tragic character because he survived. He went to war and was the one survivor essentially, and then got immediately caught up in something else. He was like, this is my thing. He was prepared to die as a scout basically, and then he somehow lived. And then because he lived, I think there's that element of oh, I survived this so that I can do this. I survived there so that I can help Eren. Eren needs my help to do his plan. I need to take charge in this situation. I think that kind of comes into play as well. It's I'm alive for a reason. I need to fight. Erwin said to fight. I'm going to fight for now, my new goal now.
Yeah. I think it's Flock is so much. He's coping. He has a huge coping mechanism because of the shit that he went through. And yeah, I think he's fully bought in because he now has life's purpose and he feels like he's a chosen person. And that's the problem with all, ethnocentrism in general and nationalism and ethno-nationalism. That's a huge thing. And it's so apparent. And it's so funny, speaking to the whole Flock shit, it's it's so funny watching season 4 when they are when all of the higher ups and the small folk are the higher ups are in there and they're just I don't even know what a fucking country is. What are we talking about here? Who are these people? And they're just I thought it was just humanity. And then how quickly they start calling themselves Eldians, the Eldian Empire. It's we were just the people. We were just humans. We were humanity.
Yeah.
And then as soon as we have something to fight against, it's just, we are this race of people. We have this pride. It's like we didn't have pride before. We didn't have like racial pride before. We didn't think this about this, or like they were such a small world. And it's just, I think that it's intentional from Isayama to show with Flock and with all the people that are walking down the street, like, yeah, Eldia will rise again. It's like, you didn't know what Eldia was. You're a pig farmer. You didn't know what Eldia was until 2 days ago. Until literally 2 days ago, you learned what Eldia was. You have no idea what you're talking about. And it is what it is. That's how people are. It's it's tribalism, and that's something that Isayama was clearly talking about and clearly going into in his series. And that's what Flock represented, this like polarization, this like, Flock was clearly victimized by the other side, and he survived, and he had this like complex that like he was the one who was going to do what needed to be done. He was going to become the devil that Erwin was, or try to do what Eren is Erwin's successor, so I'm gonna do what needs to be done. And that's what people do when they get radicalized. It's fucked up. It's fucked up. And I never got that people are saying like, oh, what about Historia sending the fucking Jaegers? I never got that. I don't think that's not what I got from it. Maybe I'm wrong.
I'm pretty sure she was standing there like waiting for the boat with her friends to come in so they could talk about peace, because they're reading her letter on the boat, and yeah, the quote of like, we need to fight so we don't have to fight anymore.
I don't think she means fight with our hands.
It doesn't mean fight. It means fight in the way
struggle
that the whole show is about.
Yeah.
A fight to live your life and to survive. They are fighting for what they believe in, which is peace. That's why Armin and everyone is going back to the island, and they say when they're on the boat, like, do you think they might just kill us?
Yeah, it's like, well, they might, and we deserve it.
And then they said, well, I'm not planning on committing suicide. And it's like, they know that they could die. They're not just going there to die, but they're going there.
You need to put your life on the line.
To try and get what they want, to fight for what they believe in. And what they believe in is peace. And that's what Historia believes in as well. So no, I don't think she was sending people out there because that would be...
The way I understood it is that it turned, again, we're going back to like Japanese shit. In Japan, there's the emperor, and then there's the shogunate. So there's the spiritual ruler of, the royal family, and they have some political power, especially more historically. They have their political power. And then there's the military leader. So there's the leader of the people, and there's the leader of the military. And that characterizes, again, going back to, everything goes back to Naruto, that characterizes the relationship in Naruto between the feudal lord, who seems like completely inconsequential, and then the like Hokage and all the Kage. They're like the shoguns of their nations. And that's kind of what's going on there. And it's also, there's like a party system forming. It's like there's the conservatives and the liberals, and Historia is the sort of emperor, royal family, leader of the people, leader, sort of the soul of the country, upholding the values of the country. And then there's this military faction that is formed out of in the power vacuum of Eren and all of the Jaegers leaving. They've sort of retaken everything, and they're this military faction that is like very strong. And there's the interplay between those two groups is a huge. Again, I'm not an expert in Japanese history, but as far as I'm aware, is a huge struggle. And if you look at Japanese history, is this issue of like, should the spiritual leader be in power? Is the real might is right to the military? Should they be in power, or should we just abolish the military altogether?
Keyboard.
Oh yeah,
because I have a bunch of stuff, but I haven't been.
Yes, Lindsay prepared a presentation, but yes. So that's kind of what's going on there. I don't think that Historia was saying, oh, we need to go and wage war. That's against everything that they talked about for the whole thing. But yeah. Can I? Oh yeah. Okay, you're doing that.
What were you gonna?
I was gonna ask you to put the chat up there. So yeah. But
yeah, because I actually have that Historia thing here.
Do you know what you're doing at all?
What do you mean? Yeah.
To show the pictures, it's not on screen.
Yeah, I know. I just wanted to get it set up
okay.
first.
All right, go ahead. Okay, so Lindsay has a little present. Do you want to go through your whole presentation? Yeah,
Well, I have like several. There's like several different things in this presentation.
you have
But
to
since
enable
we're-
it for both of
yeah.
our scenes. Yeah.
But since we're, oh, sorry there.
And go full screen on the thing. No. Go full screen on the pictures. Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring this up because I knew that I had her actual speech here already. So this is what we were talking about earlier of how it wasn't just
Can you put the chat back up? Sorry.
it wasn't just Aaron's choices that affected it was everyone's, and Historia, and I feel like Historia having this sort of speech at the end. Having the speech at the end kind of is like telling is kind of just overtly telling the audience that it wasn't just like they're kind of said it with like Aaron saying it's because it was me that this was fated to happen, and this is Historia then saying, well, it's not just because it was Aaron, it's because everyone was everyone. Aaron would have never gotten that. The Titans would have never existed if Ymir wasn't Ymir, and it could have ended with her if she wasn't herself and didn't just let Fritz do whatever he wanted and be completely subservient to him. The world is an outcome wrought by all of our choices. It's like every person that is alive is doing something, is hopefully an active participant in their own life. I'm just going to the next one, so I didn't think there'd be any point. And then she says we must fight, so that we need to fight no more, and that's the whole idea. It's like she doesn't mean fight literally. She doesn't mean we need to commit genocide so that we don't have to fight anymore. The whole thing is that no matter, and that's kind of what the end of it is, and what would have happened even if I think the other 20% of the world did get killed as well. It's like people are always going to fight, people are always going to disagree, because everyone is fighting for what they believe in, and those things go against each other, and there's not really much that you can do about that at a certain point. And that's why conflict arises, because everyone is like working towards the future that they want and they see, and if those things don't line up with each other, then you're going to have a problem. Oh yeah. And then even if we should find ourselves living lives divorced from peace, this isn't the life he wished for us, but whether he wished for it or not, it is the life that he passed on to us. And that's kind of like the whole thing. It's like the people of the past all made their own choices, and then now, whether or not the result was exactly what they wanted, if you're alive now, you're living with the consequences of other people's choices, but you still get to make your own choices on like how to deal with that going forward, basically. And now everyone's talking about the marriages, which can bring me back to my. Hold on.
You can just use the arrow keys.
Yeah, I guess so. And then and how will we live in the reprieve that remains? And that's kind of like the whole thing. It's like something crazy happened, and then there's like a little bit of a calm, and then it's like, what are you gonna do with that? Let's go back. Oh yeah, this was cool. I thought. This was just completely random. I was looking for something else that I ended up not being able to find, but this. I like this.
It's him being
lot.
like, God, I'm even shorter than I was. Fuck, he was giving me that candy because he thought I was a child.
Yeah, but
and now I'm even shorter because I'm in a wheelchair.
Yeah, with the clown giving him candy, and his eye is like all covered, and then he's like, maybe I should have just taken that lollipop. And then there's that whole thing, but I'll go back because we're talking about the whole Mikasa, people were talking about people marrying other people. So
This is so tiny.
because it's like in the corner of the screen when the credits are going.
I know, but it's even smaller than the. Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
What about
Yes.
it?
Sorry.
What
One
about
second.
it?
Let me just consult my notes here. Okay. So I've seen a lot of discourse in our comments,
Thank you for becoming a bold enjoyer. Thank you.
in like a million different TikToks, and everyone seems extremely divided on whether or not Mikasa married Jean and had a baby. And there are many there are multiple different aspects to this that I have been thinking about intensely. So we will go over them. First of all, I believe that this is Mikasa, Jean, and their child coming to visit Eren at the tree. Some people seem to think that this randomly is Armin and Annie's child that Mikasa is holding there with Armin at the grave.
Yeah, that's why the guy is clearly putting his hand on Mikasa's shoulder.
Yeah, that's
Mikasa's
why,
holding his
you know,
child,
it's
and nobody else is there.
It's Armin's
It's
baby.
surely
That's
Armin's
why
baby.
it has black hair. This is so clearly Armin, which is why he has the exact same haircut as Jean and looks
Which
exactly
they
like
clearly
Jean.
showed off and put attention to. I know I'm muted. It's more funny to say. They clearly put more attention to in the final scene where he was like, "Oh, I gotta look good," and then he's like slicking his hair back like that. It's clearly Jean, you guys.
Yeah.
I don't know who is.
But
fucking.
It's
talking
even
about
better because I found this picture of when they go to Marley.
Yeah.
It's literally he's even wearing like
Did you
that's
get the manga picture?
no.
Oh, it's even more clear in the manga. It's full like
He
people
has
are
the
fully
same
focused.
hat. So yes, I feel like this is Jean. I will now go over why some people seem to think that it would be okay. I don't know what order I should do this in. Okay, maybe I'll do the flower thing second because that's a big point in this. Okay, here they are again with their baby.
You have to zoom in way more. It's a tiny screen. Yeah. I mean, come on.
Also, the guy is taller than Mikasa. Last time I checked, Armin, I don't think is taller than Mikasa. Some people think that it's a random guy. I think I think that
nobody actually thinks that.
I
People
can
are
see
coping
how
as fuck.
in the manga that could be potential because there's no hair color. But if it was a random guy, then I feel like they could just make him look more clearly like a random guy. If they're putting a guy that to me clearly looks like Jean, then they're doing that for a reason. The other thing is that I have this. So people I have been seeing all over the place that Mikasa has white lilies on her grave, which means she's a virgin and she died pure. Multiple things to this. First of all, I don't know what kind of lilies people have been looking at because these are not lilies. You want to see what a lily looks like? That's a lily. Hold on. This right here is a lily. Does that look anything like this? No, it does not. You know what that does look like? A carnation. So first of all,
what does a carnation mean?
I have multiple things on what a carnation means. So white carnations can also mean purity and good luck. However, where it is. So this is about like white carnations are truly beautiful flowers that represent purity and good luck. So if you know someone who needs a little extra luck in their life, whether or not they're newly engaged, just graduating, or embarking on a new adventure, white carnations are the way to go.
But purity means that she's a virgin anyway. So even though you're saying it's not a lily, it's a carnation, that means that means that she's a virgin still. So fucking fuck you.
Yes. The other thing is there's another thing here that says carnations are a sweet symbol of love, both in Japan and across the globe. They are often given and received as caring gifts to close family members and significant others. Carnations come in a handful of colors and can even be dyed. Both pink and white carnations are used for funeral floral setups to express sympathy and remembrance for the dearly departed. White carnations especially are symbolic of grief, a deep sense of sorrow with everlasting love and loyalty.
Well, that just means that she was a virgin. She was loyal to him.
What color symbolizes death in Japan? White. I just was just clicking on a bunch of stuff. So basically, I think that people were like, I saw this especially on TikTok. Like, I swear every second thing was like, she has white lilies, which means she's a virgin. First of all, I've already proven that those aren't lilies. And second of all, carnations can have different meanings and whatever. The other thing, and I think the more important aspect of that is, if someone is telling me this, I have to make either one of two assumptions about them. Either that they are a literal child, or that they are creepy as fuck, because why on earth do you care so much?
You realize you're just creating more Jaegerists at this point, right?
Sure. But I'm not really sure why people are so obsessed with her being pure for Aaron. That's weird. That's so incredibly bizarre to me.
Look at that
Yes, this is the other thing, and this is interesting because this I'll show the manga panel in a second, but yes, she is wearing a wedding ring.
Zoom in a little bit more because it's in the corner.
Right there.
Clearly a wedding ring. It's on her middle finger.
It's not. That's her finger from the other side.
That's her other hand.
She's like this, so it's like
what's that under her? I guess that's her left. Oh, I'm muted. Under her left pinky there.
I think
there's another. Is that another?
I think it's like this.
Is that like the weird cleft of her finger?
I think it's like this. I think it's like that. Like her pinky is on top of her.
Oh well,
pinky,
yeah. There's not another.
There's her ring
yeah,
finger,
yeah.
And then her other ring finger.
Yeah. That's her ring finger. That's a wedding ring. I mean, come on.
Yeah. So I think that I feel like I've thoroughly debunked that theory.
Thank you for doing the Lord's work. It's it's funny that it doesn't need that much debunking. It's just look at all you've done is Google and then look at that's clearly not a lily. That's clearly not a lily. I'm not a flower guy. I think it just shows the proportion of male viewers.
And what's also funny to me is that when you look up a white carnation, it also lists purity as an aspect. So they could have just been slightly more on track and said it's a white carnation, which represents purity.
But no,
and also
it's 16-year-old.
No, but it's also interesting because lilies are also funeral flowers. Often, white lilies are also used at funerals. So even if they were white lilies, and the thing that I have to think about is, I feel like, because if you look at the manga panel, and this is not very. Oh my god.
You could have got a better quality.
I should have.
You can't. That's the evidence you're showing. That tiny. You gotta get a better picture. I can't see anything.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, she's clearly not wearing a ring here. That's all you really need to see is
that's
that.
Her pinky.
There's no emphasis on a ring.
Right,
Whereas what I'm saying is the ring, I feel like, was possibly added in because of people saying this. So then, like you were saying, of the manga is almost like the first draft. So here they add in a subtle little ring right there, just to show that. But at the same time, they also added in these flowers, which then people had to draw attention to the flowers, possibly to draw attention away from the ring because they didn't want their fantasy to come crumbling down. So second of all, this is fifth of all, but I was also just thinking of imagine if, so there is the aspect of the author, putting a flower there for symbolism, but then I also think of if these flowers were meant to represent her virginity and her purity. Who in the town is doing this? Is Armin yes, I'm arranging my friend's funeral as an 80-year-old. She was a virgin till the day she died, and I'm going to put these flowers on her grave because that was the only aspect of her personality that mattered at this point, was that she was pure for my dead best friend Aaron. And I need everyone in this town to know that.
Yeah, it all the conversation around the Mikasa, like what she did after Eren died, is just it becomes so clear the age and the disposition of the people who are into the series, because it's so widespread. It's so obvious, and like it's just clear. Everybody is like 15 to 20. That's like they must be. They probably have never met a widow in their life. Like I just don't know what to tell you. It's like, yeah, some people, it's really rough to lose the person that you love, but that doesn't mean that your life is over. That doesn't mean, like, what kind of world? And also, you can also say, like, this is a global series, so like a lot of the people are maybe from a lot more traditional countries where like it is maybe against social norms to like marry after your husband dies or something, and it's better for you to like stay pure or whatever in their memory. But the idea, this like weird fucking 13-year-old girl idea that like you have a soulmate and one true love only, and that necessarily means that you can never love again or experience happiness throughout your whole life, is childish. It is childish, and that's the only word for it. It is childish. Like it's that simple. And anybody, like, literally all you had to do was just zoom in to the picture in the show. And by the way, a lot of people are also saying that like this isn't Mikasa, it's somebody else. If you want any proof, it's fucking the ending song. It's Mikasa's voice actor singing. When this shot happens, she stops singing, and then it goes back to Revo. So,
if also people saying that this take isn't popular, go to like any.
It's incredibly popular.
It is so popular.
That's the thing. That's something I want to make very clear. You know, not just browsing TikTok, but again, it's like a lot of people have like one opinion, and they're like, and I do this sometimes too. It's like, well, the majority, like there's not that many people who think this. It's always more people than you think. It's always a larger subset of the community than you think this shit and say this stuff. It is an overwhelming number of people who actually who believe in this, who are concerned about like the Chad Aaron stuff, who are concerned with this aspect or that aspect of the ending, who are complaining about this or that. It's like there's been multiple people in the chat for the last 2 hours who have been saying like, this isn't that many people. What people are really mad about is this. It's like that might be what you're mad about personally, but the vast majority of people who are like flaming the ending are upset about like the reasons that we brought up throughout these last 2 hours, and this is one of them. Mm-hmm. There are so many people who are clearly upset that Aaron didn't, and that they made Aaron in the last episode like freak out about how much he loves and like confess his love about Mikasa, and then die, and it's unrequited and tragic, and they don't like that. They wanted that to like if you were at least going to do that and make Aaron in love with Mikasa, then why'd you rip it away from me in the same thing? They're more mad about that than any reasoning or any other bullshit. They're more concerned about that than they are about what actually happened in the story. So they come up with a bunch of bullshit about why that's not Jean and why this isn't that and why this is that or whatever. It's all window dressing for the real opinion, which was this wasn't what they wanted. This isn't what they theorized was going to happen. This isn't the story that they saw playing out for the last 3 years because they were attached to this part of the story or that part of the story or that part of Aaron's character, which was actually a facade. They didn't see through that. They didn't see all of the buildup for all of these different things. They had a very clear idea of what they wanted, and it just didn't happen. And that's the root of all of this. That's kind of what we're getting to for this whole thing. I think that, and that's what I mean. That's what we've been talking about this whole time, and that's kind of what it all means. Is it's not about any of the specific details of all of this shit, and they'll come up with a million other reasons, a million other excuses of why this didn't work, of why this was dumb or why this was bad, and then other people will say, well, that actually doesn't matter. What matters is this over here, and that's why it's bad. Not that reason that you just talked about, but this reason over here. This is endless, and what it all boils down to. That's why I keep zooming out to like these greater things about like what it means to end a series or what it means to do this or that, and how and the cultural impact of different things is because it doesn't matter. These details in the grander argument of, you know, was the ending good or bad, and like people really not liking the ending. The real problems that they had were much more fundamental and foundational about their understanding of the series, about their understanding of media, and the way that they experienced everything. And again, the ending is not perfect, but like to argue about whether or not, about like the fact that Mikasa was like somehow a virgin for her whole life, despite the fact that she's literally sitting there with Jean, showing a child, like it's like, why would Isayama draw that? Again, it's like all of these details are inconsequential to them. The point is that they didn't like it. That's not the ending that they saw. That's not the ending. That's not the feeling that they wanted to have. They didn't want to have this sort of tragic pang of longing and like disappointment and like, oh, but we came so close to like, you know, some unrecoverable thing, or we came so close to like tragically, you know, dominating the world or something and living with that guilt, or we came, you know, it's so tragic to see life moving on and nothing matters after we die. I thought that Eren was like a super god person who could change the world. Turns out that he's just another fucking idiot who got power that he couldn't understand and wasn't able to control, because nobody can control human conflict. Nobody can control war. And it's tragic, but that doesn't mean that we're powerless. These are the ideas that the story is dealing with, and these are the ideas that the story has dealt with from the beginning. Nobody saw that. They saw Eren being a Giga Chad. They saw Mikasa pining after Eren. They were surprised that there was a love interest thing there. And then when it was ripped away and it was tragic that she had to go on living despite her love dying, and you know, trying to find happiness in the world that he left behind, that's not good. That's not satisfying to them, because that's not what they wanted. And all of the details, all these little things, they aren't actually consequential.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it there. I've seen a lot of people that say, you know, Mikasa could never move on from Eren because he was her soulmate. I think that that's a little bit ridiculous. I also think people kind of forget that these characters are 19 years old. So, and I think also the other thing is that Mikasa and Eren, like, they loved each other, sure, but I feel like they were also extremely like trauma bonded. Like their entire relationship started when they were being attacked, and then they murdered people together. And like that was the start of them knowing each other. That was the first time they met. So, and Mikasa had to she did care about Eren, but also her entire life revolved around protecting Eren. So I imagine, you know, spending all of your formative years being so incredibly obsessed with this one person, and then she has to kill him because she realizes that that's the right thing to do. But and then after 10 years, like how Eren said, 10 years, I feel like they showed that passage of time to again further confirm that Mikasa did move on, but it did take a long time. So then you have 19-year-old Mikasa who loved Eren and had to kill him, and then you have 30-year-old Mikasa. 10 years later, she's like an adult now and has been living an entirely new life, and it makes perfect sense that she like could be ready to move on with a new chapter, and maybe she won't love Jean in the same way that she loved Eren, and I hope that she wouldn't love Jean in the same way that she loved Eren, because I think the way that she loved Eren was not really that healthy, honestly. I think that like there was a lot. It was like a really, really loaded relationship. And I think that there's also a lot of people that say, well, even if she married someone, it could never have been Jean because she didn't like him back when they were 14. And I am like, again, for the same reasons, in 10 years, a lot can change. And I think that because Mikasa clearly never lets go of Eren, she visits his grave. She brings her child to visit his grave. She is buried with his scarf. And I think that's all to say. It's like someone is widowed and then they get remarried, but they move their original wedding ring onto their other finger. It's like Jean wouldn't be competing with Eren because Eren is dead. He is gone. It's an entirely new thing, and it's not like they just like broke up and Eren's still out there waiting to come sweet. Well, I mean, he's a bird, so I like the memes, by the way, of like Jean eating a sandwich that Mikasa made for him and then a bird like taking it away. Like those are really funny. But I think that there's I think again that's where like the all the teenagers freaking out because they can't conceptualize that people can change that drastically from the time that you're 19 till the time that you're 30, and just how different things can be. And also the concept of going from 19 to like 80 or however, she seems to die of old age, so she's pretty old. So the fact that people want her to have been alone that entire time is kind of just sad, you know? And the fact, and if anyone would understand the way that she felt about Aaron, it would be Jean, because he was there the entire time. He knows that she loved Aaron, and clearly they were able, like, was okay with that, because she could never have had a relationship with someone who wasn't okay with her, like, having that piece of her heart that was still like reserved for Aaron, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, it's just so obviously Jean. It just is, and it makes sense to me because they were rivals the whole time. It's like they always fought and like competed with each other, and Jean was in love with Mikasa from the first time he saw her. And Jean, like, in many ways mirrored Aaron in, you know, especially earlier on in the series, but you know, they were always like competing with each other and rivals and foiling each other. And so it makes sense that if she was going to marry anyone, that it would have been Jean. You know, it just makes sense. So, and I don't think that's a mystery or super complicated to understand for anybody who isn't blinded by their own simping. I mean, like, clearly, like, and blinded by their own weird feelings for Aaron, and the feeling like their power fantasy was ripped away from them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just it's really transparent. I think it's pretty clear. I don't think anyone who isn't attached to that version of Aaron and who isn't attached to that part of the story or that version of how the things could have gone is actually questioning whether or not Jean and Mikasa got together. It's abundantly clear to anyone who's willing to open their mind even a little bit.
Yeah.
If you're the only way you wouldn't believe that is if your mind is completely closed. And I think that goes for a lot of the ending. Not all of it. Some things, like the one thing we haven't really touched on, because I didn't get a chance to rewatch the finale, but like other than editing it. But the only thing that I heard when I was talking to some dude in the Discord, one of our viewers, if you weren't here from the beginning, is that he brought up that like there was 50 different reasons why Aaron like chose to do what he did, like whether it was fate or whether he, you know, loved Mikasa, or whether it was like Ymir's will, or whether it was the Thing's will, or whether it was whatever. And I honestly, I need to rewatch that part to fully grasp like what people's problem with that is. But to me, with my understanding of it, it was a combination of different things. I think that it's just, going back to Aaron's disposition as a person, and causality loop.
I think that it's also interesting to think about, because I think Aaron and Mikasa isn't the only, or Jean and Mikasa isn't the only example of like people moving on. Because earlier we talked about Ymir and Historia as being like the one other like very strong romantic relationship. But obviously in the end we see Historia like get married and have a kid with someone else.
Yeah.
And I think that some people who like don't like the Ymir and Historia thing are like, oh look, she married a man. She never loved Ymir. That was never a thing. But I think that is also like part of the same story of like Ymir died and Historia wasn't going to spend her entire life just being sad and waiting for her to come back when she's never going to come back. So
it's also a tragedy with her.
It's a tragedy, and
the tragedy that that her and Ymir were clearly had romantic feelings for each other, and they're both girls. And then because Historia becomes queen and she has all these responsibilities and she has to have children or pass on her family line because of all this Titan bullshit, she has to marry a guy. And it's like, she could be bi, maybe. I think she probably loves her husband in the end, clearly, is showing their life together. But it's tragic that like the whole point is that she's like taking on this mantle of the queen, and she has to let go of Krista, who is the person that she chose and the person that she became. with all of her relationship with Ymir, the way that she hung out with her friends, the way that she was like she wanted to be a soldier. She kept trying to like go back and fight all the time. She always tried to go back in her uniform any chance she could and be involved in Levi's squad and shit. And she had the tragedy of her like becoming queen, marrying a man, having children to possibly be sacrificed. That's all part of this tragedy that she had to like sacrifice herself for the greater good and to do what's right. Sacrifice herself as an individual. And that's, again, going back to what Armin said, going back to what Erwin said, going back to the whole thing in the show about how the price for peace and the price for prosperity is not low. It's a pretty steep price. It might mean losing your life. You're lucky if you have to lose yourself, because that's what happened to her, and that's reflected in Eren and Mikasa as well. It's this. It's. I think that it's possibly foreshadowing for that relationship in a way, where and intentional or not, is still unclear. I think that, again, going back to what we were talking about before, I think Isayama had Mikasa and Eren being together kind of from at least at some point in the series. He didn't just add it in at the end. I think he probably could have foreshadowed it a bit better, but he's always had this complicated relationship with romance. Go back to what I was talking about before. But I think it's the same kind of principle there. It's the same principle with a lot of Marlo and Hitch. It's the same thing. It's like they never really got together. Hitch was clearly in love with Marlo and Marlo was like taking on more responsibility. He like sacrificed his position in the military police, this super prestigious position, so that he could join the scouts and do some good, because that's what he wanted to do. That was consistent with his ideals. And she really loved him for that. And then how tragic is it that like he finally proves himself to be like a badass, and she falls in love with him, and then they can't be together because he's fucking dead and he sacrificed himself for the greater good. All of these things, it's an echo. It's the same. It's a rhyming scheme going on here. And it's the same with Eren and Mikasa. It's the same with the end of the show. It's consistent. That's what I mean by it being consistent with the whole show. It's not consistent with the super dark turn that everything took in the last quarter of the series, but it's consistent with the ending is consistent overall with everything that had been set up philosophically, morally, et cetera, with everything that was going on.
One sec. I need to fix this on my camera.
You're done
come
with
back
your presentation?
I'm just taking it away so I can double check.
But yeah. It's just I after watching it, it's just a lot more, and again, we haven't read the manga, and a lot of people are saying that like the anime kind of cleaned things up a lot. But it seems like people really... I was surprised by how much more I liked the ending and how much more cool I was with it than what people had led me to expect. People were like... The whole conversation was about how terrible the ending was, how it fucked everything up, how they were pleading that there would be some kind of anime original ending. And then I get to the ending, and it's what I would have expected, roughly speaking. Little things here and there, but like generally what I would have expected from like the start of season 4 or even earlier, possibly. Probably the start of season 4. I'm not that crazy, but like, I if nobody's told me anything, I would probably feel the same. The only difference in the way that I feel about the ending is in response to the overwhelming sense of dread and regret and depression and anger that everybody feels, and that was characterizing the whole public experience of this ending. If that's the only difference. As far as my opinions on it, I think I would have felt just as consistently interested in the ending and just as satisfied with it, whether anybody said anything or not. Just as far as the content itself. It's just crazy to me, like how, because I was expecting like, oh, maybe it's actually worse than I thought. Maybe Isayama kind of fucked up and fumbled the bag in the end. It was about what I would have expected. It was about, in a good way, I liked it. I liked it a lot. Do you have anything else you want to say? Do you guys have any other things you want to ask us about? Anything that we hadn't really touched on as much? Levi got his closure with his decision. Yeah, I think he made some choices with no regrets. I think that, he fulfilled his thing. The ending was never bad. It was a bit messy in the manga, but nothing near bad. The people mad about the ending just wanted Eren to win, which makes no sense. I mean, true. It felt worse 2 years ago when I read the manga. Yeah. I feel like a lot of it comes, I feel like it's like, if you're a little bit, so the whole ending thing being just unsatisfying naturally, just because things in anime and manga specifically rarely end. These long, huge series like rarely end well. So there's like and just like it having to taper everything down, like I've mentioned multiple times. But that along and if that initially and then it being a little bit messy, compounding with that makes people really pissed off. So it just ending in general and then it being a little bit messy and it could have ended a little bit better. And then just the feeling of this thing that you've been attached to for 5 to 10 years probably being over and this huge part of your life being over, I think feels just naturally unsatisfying, especially with an ending that's like bittersweet, where, you know, not only do we see Eren and Mikasa not get to end up together, everybody eventually just die and live, you know, in peace, but, you know, with this longing of like the life they could have had if they were all still together. That's kind of sad. And then also past the ending of, you know, war still goes on. Historia and all the Jaegerist faction, it's all, there's conflict still happening and there's wars fought elsewhere and it's the struggle continues. So what was Eren's death even for if war is still going on? That can feel a little bit unsatisfying to people. So that adds on to the pile of like compounding unsatisfaction. And then along with that, seeing that extra thing of the, you know, the thousands of years of progression, this like technologically advanced mega city building up where Shiganshina was, and then and then that being nuked and crumbling down, and then the cycle possibly repeating itself. I feel like that also adds like this, oh well, what was it all even for? But that like not that existential nihilism is kind of characteristic of just life in general. And to me, that kind of reveals the age of some of the people who are possibly complaining about all of this as well. If you're 16, you might not have, it's less likely that you would have had like this existential breakdown that in your life, or like, what is it all for? Why am I even going to school? What if I get a job? What if I, you know, what's the point of even getting married and having kids? What's the point of trying in life if I'm just going to die one day? What's the point of making all this money and wasting my life working? Why don't I just do whatever I want? Well, I can't do that because that's depressing as shit. I want to be with people. You know, all this existential thing that just happens. Like, what's the meaning of life? Maybe you know, if you're like 16, you never had asked those questions before, and then you get to the ending of Attack on Titan, and then there's the same thing. It's like, well, what's the point of Eren's life if 2,000 years later everybody starts fighting again? It's like, well, what's the point of your life if everything you do doesn't matter after 50 years after you're dead, or even 10 years after you're dead? In 100 years, nobody's going to remember us. So why does it matter? Well, what, are you just not going to get up anymore? You're just not going to get out of bed? You're just not going to do anything? That's, you know, it means just as much in real life as it does in the story. It's, you know, you still have to live. We all have to live with each other. We all have to fight for what we believe in, live for what we believe in, and die for what we believe in. And that's the true meaning of life. And that's what this story was about. And that's what a lot of shonen stories are about. I think it also feels unsatisfying because there were elements of this, like with Armin and Zeke, where he's like, it feels like my whole life was just so I could run up that hill with them. And this one moment, this one beautiful, pure moment. And a lot of people, and then everyone's like, oh, well, what, is he just talking to jutsuing Zeke right now to like give up control of the Titans? It's like, I mean, kinda, but he just felt hopeless. He wasn't going along with Eren because he thought it was good. He just felt like he had no power and he was at the whims of Eren and Ymir. So like, all, you know, it feels to people like, oh, this is just the pain arc. This is just Naruto 2.0 talk no jutsu. And it's like, that's what, like, I don't know. And that again goes back to this thing of like everybody expecting Isayama to like have an answer. Everybody wanted Isayama to like either do something that they'd never seen before, like genocide is the answer because that's really dark and edgy and fucked up and shocking. They either want that or they like, oh, what is Isayama going to say here? There's a lot of complicated ideas. He's talking about like racism and fascism and genocide and war and suffering and famine and classism and, you know, the sins of the father, are they the sins of the son, and thousands of years of ethnic cleansing and wars without who's even at fault anymore. Are we the monster or are they the monster? All of these things. He's talking about so many interesting and cool and like very poignant and important ideas. It's so crazy. I'm 16 and I've never read anything like this before. What is this even about? I didn't learn about this in school. This is so expensive. He's right. It's crazy what he's doing right now. What? So the answer is just to try and love each other and to try and work with each other and be ready to sacrifice yourself for democracy and freedom, and try and, you know, be willing to sacrifice yourself for the greater good, and try and talk things out with your enemies, and try and, you know, do what's best for the next generation, and have faith in each other, and try not to kill each other. That's the answer. That's boring as fuck. That's lame as shit.
Also,
why is this a story? Why, like, I thought, Isayama, I thought you were going to have another answer. I thought you were going to do something else with this idea. Turns out you're just saying what Naruto said 15 years ago. It's like, yeah, there's only one story. Like, there's only one way that this can go, because genocide is bad. Like, I don't know what you want Isayama to say. It's like he's not fucking Noah. He's not fucking, like, I don't know who you thought he was. He's not Jesus. He doesn't have a fucking answer to human suffering. He's a 20, how old was he? 19 when he started writing it? He's like a pushing 30 Japanese guy who grew up in a small town in Japan and thought about what it was like if there was giant drunk people wandering around past the mountains that looked like walls. How crazy would that be if people were getting eaten? And then the story evolves larger, and then people are expecting all these crazy revelations about human society, morality, and culture, and the future that humanity will take, because they're 18 years old and they've never read a book. And then they're like, what? So he's just saying the same thing that this guy said and that people have been saying for the last 5,000 plus years of human history? Yeah, because that's the answer. It's to try. It's to try and make things better. It's not to try and tear things down. It's not to try and reduce everybody else to an us is them mentality. It's not to try and be tribalistic and only protect your group. It's to try and it's to put yourself out there to go out on a limb at the expense of your own life and possibly the lives of those around you, for the sake of the greater good, for the sake of reaching out a hand and being peaceful. Because whether it's Ramsey, or whether it's Zeke, or whether it's fucking, you know, whoever, Marlowe, or whoever, any of the countless people who died in the pursuit of all of this, these people who are disconnected across the world, who got trampled by the rumbling, all they wanted to do was live their life. They didn't have any gripes with the Eldians. Half the people maybe didn't even know about the fucking Eldians. That shit happened thousands of years ago. It's not relevant in every culture around the world. Only these two countries have Titan powers, you know? So, like, it's yeah, maybe it is a little bit simple, and maybe the answer is a little bit less complicated than a lot of people might have expected, but it was never going to be anything else, because there is no complicated solution and some crazy hidden meaning.
A person writing a story can't just figure out some magical solution that people have been trying to find throughout all of history and has never been able to be achieved. It's like you said, it's literally the same thing as in Naruto. And we did a discussion about the pain arc, and so many people are mad because they say, well, look, this works. Having everyone have nukes works, and it prevents fighting and it prevents wars. And the whole thing is that, well, it really doesn't. And it's the same even at the end of Attack on Titan, how you get rid of the Titan powers and everyone is on equal footing. Eren says he leveled the playing field, and even still, people gained power and technology and then fought each other again.
Yeah.
And the only way to stop that, and it's mentioned so many times, even in just the last episode, it's that you have to try and understand other people. You have to try and, like, be empathetic and, like, reach out and understand that everyone else is also a person and they're also living their lives. And
yes.
And people naturally gravitate towards, like, this is us and then that's them. And the only way that doesn't happen is when everyone is humanity. And that's kind of what goes back to, like, when they all think that they're just humanity, then they're all on the same side. But even then, it's not like there was no fighting and no murder and no violence and no horrible things happening on the island. You know, there still was. And that's just kind of part of it, but that doesn't mean that people shouldn't try to make the world a better place. And part of trying to make the world a better place is that it's hard and it's complicated and it's vague and there's not one thing that you can do. You know, with doing the bad thing, you can kill every single person on Earth. Sure, that would solve a lot of problems, but you can't just magically do one thing and fix everyone's
Yeah,
problems.
it's not going to
everywhere.
change the root problem, because the root problem is not just the people that are here now. It's deeper than that. Thank you, Joshua Anderson, for the $5. He said, "Believe it." Nice one. Yeah, it's. I just think that it's a big problem that a lot of people were thinking that there was going to be some kind of like secret super that Aaron was going to solve for X and undo all of human suffering. Like it's not that simple. That's the point. And that's it. And is that unsatisfying? Yeah. That's life. It's not easy. There's no easy solution for it. And that's, you might be unsatisfied by that, but like, don't take it up with Isayama. Don't take it up with Aaron. Don't take it up with anyone in the Attack on Titan community that life is hard and unfair. That's not Isayama's fault. That's not Attack on Titan's fault. That's not the story being written poorly. That's life. And that's what I mean by it showing the age of the people that are complaining, Like that's what I mean, because they it's not to be ashamed of, but they might not have experienced how fucking harsh life can be. Or maybe they wanted something, maybe they have, and they just wanted the people who maybe like were full on Jaegers just because they thought it was fun. That's another thing. It's like we're talking about the Jaegerists and people who believe in that shit and think that Giga Chad Aaron was cool because he was, they self-inserted. A lot of people, I think, just also liked Aaron being a Giga Chad just because they liked the violent aspect of it. They liked the fucking murder porn, the crazy action sequence, and they just thought it was cool. And that's, that's different. That if you just enjoy the series that way, if you enjoy any series that way, that's fine. The problem is when you try to make a moral argument and you try to act like that's good, or like, you know what I'm saying? So, if you just think that was entertaining, that's something completely different. But a lot of the people are trying to like make crazy arguments and like act as if, it was there was something else out there. It's not,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I saw someone talking about Zeke's plan, and I think that this all comes back down to like the opportunities and the choices of people previous, like leading up to the thing. Because I think if Aaron and Zeke had kind of been like swapped, and Zeke was the guy who was able to be in control of that situation, then his plan could have been like the same as the as inevitable as the rumbling.
Yeah.
If he had been in like the power position where whatever he is like destined to do, but made up by his own beliefs, is what's going to happen, then that could have happened. And I think that it's kind of saying, just like if Armin got it, he might have been able to think of something else, or if anyone had it, then they could have done something different. And so I think that like all the other solutions like were viable. Zeke's plan was like maybe more humane because it's not killing any like alive
possibly people. But it's a half measure.
But what I was saying is like it's more humane, but at the same time it didn't allow for what Aaron believed in, which was having his friends live long and happy lives and and have the choice to do what they want. Zeke's plan was removing the choice from
freedom,
the freedom. Obviously, Aaron removed the freedom from 80% of people by killing them, but
that's part of life too. It's part of the bias that Isayama was exploring. This feeling of us versus them, this tribalism, and this like throwing up your hands of like these fucking global situations are way too complicated. Trying to like make peace over thousands of years is way too complicated. I can't guarantee my friend's safety. I need to, seize the power for myself and do what I think is right. Jay Snow says, why would you make the entire world hate and actively want people on one island dead? Shit makes no sense and has never happened in human history. The shit writing decision is what birthed the Jaegerists. I think you need to read a little bit more about history there. Because, again, if we go back to Japan's history, where this is from, I think there's a big algorithm. Obviously, aside from Japan, so you can step back. The Hebrews is obviously a big thing here, and clearly the Eldians are supposed to be like kind of an allegory for like Jewish people. They got the armbands. They're like, discriminated against like across the whole world. And then they're like, God's chosen people, so to speak. And they are, they're constantly being like pushed back into this one area, and then they retaliate and go out. And I don't really want to get into all that for obvious reasons, but Japan's history is, if we go back to the whole, this is Japanese. Thank you, Brian. Yes, this is Japanese. If we go back to the Japanese history point, if you look back at World War II, it's the same thing. If this whole thing of like this back and forth, if you look at the history, again, I've said it for 15 times this discussion, I'll continue to say it. I'm no expert in Japanese history. I don't claim to be an expert in Japanese history. From the broad strokes that I seem to understand, but probably I'm misunderstanding, but just go with me on this. That it's a big part of Japan's sort of overall history. It's just like invading China and Korea and that whole little area, and then taking over that little part, and then they get pushed back, and then they get fought back, and they get into their island. And then Japan was isolationist for a long time. I don't want to put a number on it, but they were completely isolationist, sealed off all their borders. Only like one port was available to like, I think, the Dutch for a period of time. But like overall, they even demilitarized themselves. They got rid of the military for a long time. And I think that was after World War II. I'm miscategorizing things, but like all of these kind of ideas of sealing off your borders, this island nation feeling like there's just the whole world is out to get them. They get bombed by Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They get like completely flattened by and with all the fire bombings. Don't even mention those. Like everybody talks about the two big ones. They don't talk about all the rest of the fire bombings that completely ravaged the landscape. That like if you think of in America, for example, like to make an kind of an out like to show just how much that might affect a culture's consciousness around these type of stories. How many American stories? Look at Star Wars. Star Wars. What's Star Wars about? It's about the young plucky underdog farmer who one day, his parents, his aunt and uncle die, and then he goes off to war to fight the big evil empire. This evil empire from the outside who's trying to come in and take freedoms away from people. And with the Dark Lord or whatever, this king, this evil lord who's like, it's an allegory in a way for like the American story of the underdog who fights against the great evil empire. Or if you look at since 9/11, there's been plenty of stories that are either just about 9/11 or about some, a culture at the peak of its development gets attacked, and then they just like they need to go out into the world, and everything kind of changes like that. These big cultural touchstones, and just the idea in general of like of World War II. That's the story of World War II of like the American heroes like coming in to like stop the evil racist fascist controlling thing. Just this whole these concrete ideas, they're so prevalent in American culture and in Western storytelling because it's such a huge touchstone in our culture, and our perspective on these events historically influence the way that stories are written by the next generation and onwards. That's what culture is. Same thing is true for Japan, and that's exactly what was happening with an island nation. Their people feels like attacked by all sides, and are they going to like this constant struggle of whether the military faction is going to lead or the people's faction is going to lead, and are they going to explode out and make the violence worse, or are they going to try and temper themselves and be at peace and try and work with the world. That's a struggle in Japan with how they deal with outside forces, especially in the area around there over the last 100 years or so.
I also think that saying why would the author didn't have to do this, the author didn't have to make the entire world hate this one island. The author didn't have to do anything. He could have made a nice little story about 3 kids, Aaron, Mikasa, and Armin, and they live happily ever after in their fun little life, and there's no titans, and there's no war, and it's all just good times. So, that's what it comes down to. It's like, oh, it's like unfair or unrealistic that like everyone hated them. It's like, well, it does parallel real life, but it's also made up, and like when you're creating something, you can choose like what elements from real life to bring in, and also to like what extent. So choosing to like, these people can turn into titans, and at one point like destroyed a bunch of the world, and then now they're on this island and everyone is like in fear. How active that fear is obviously depends on like where you are in the world, but you know, it's just part of the story and part of the conflict. And if like if only 25% of the world actually hated them and they were on this island, and then the rest of them didn't, well, then Eren might not have had to do the rumbling, because then like they would have more people on their side and there wouldn't be need to resort to that drastic measures. So in order to like get to the end that he wanted to happen, the stakes had to be the way that they were, or else the story wouldn't make sense. Just at all, basically. And that's the thing as well, because, you know, even if these countries all hated them, at the end of the day, most of those people were still civilians that were completely innocent and had nothing to do with the way that they were raised and the place that they were living in. They just happened to get born there, and their deaths were a result of the choices made by their predecessors, in the same way that Eren's choices were the results of the choices of people that came before him as well.
Yeah. Guts Vagabond keeps talking about why Eren would send Dinah to eat his mom. I think you need to understand, it's not just his choice. It's not that simple. It has to do with determinism, and it has to do with the whole way the story is approaching conflict and the cyclical nature of human conflict. We've covered this kind of already in a way that, you know, it wasn't just his choice to do that. It's that it had already happened. And Eren Eren isn't just like, okay, I'm in this, okay, I'm experiencing time at all times at the same time. So I'm in this, and what that means isn't I'm in this secret control room. I'm in this, like, in that place where he was with Armin, or at the cabin with Mikasa, and he's just there, and he has like, oh, I can see this and I can choose that, and I can see this and I can take that. It's like he reaches out, and he had already reached out. And he had already pulled his hand back before he did that. And he had it's a loop. It's like loop. This is also just a problem with this kind of storytelling in general. And it's something that is also because of the disaster fiction that I was talking about earlier. This kind of like big explosive thing at the end of an anime where like the story gets so big, and like now we're dealing with like problems of the foundation of reality, and like how time works, and how this, you know, you see the cycle playing out before you and all this stuff. You see that in Code Geass. You see that. I'm not going to mention everything because I don't want to spoil every series out there. Similar in Full Metal Alchemist. That's not really a spoil. You see that in episode 1. This idea of like confronting God, or confronting the root of humanity, or the root of all life, and because, you know, again, Japan as a country was like rocked by this crazy conflict that completely shifted the way that the entire cultural consciousness interacted with the rest of the world and themselves. It was crazy, and it shook everything, and it changed that whole part of the world, and it was a huge schism in their history when that happened. And that is reflected in many anime in a lot of different ways, and different anime handle it differently. Berserk is also another one, if you think about it that way. You know, there's different takes on all this, but this idea of like, whoa, we're getting to the final thing, and it's not just a big battle between two guys. It's like, oh, I've just learned the truth of all of reality, and I've unlocked a secret superpower, or I've unlocked the fatalistic, deterministic, you know, I can't control anything way that the whole universe worked. These are huge ideas that are beyond the understanding of how we interpret time. So when Eren says, and when Eren is describing, you know, how he interacts with the world, when he's talking to his dad, when he is, you know, convincing him to like kill the royal family, and he's like, you got to do it, Dad, blah, blah, blah. That already happened before he did that. So like, the point is, it's happened. Whether he chose it or not has to do with, again, what Lindsay keeps bringing up and keeps trying to get through everybody's head, is it's the cyclical nature is based on his internal. That's what he means when he says, I'm an idiot. I had no, like, I did all this stuff. Turns out I'm just a fucking idiot and I shouldn't have got this power. If you got this power, it would have been different. If this person got this power, this would have been different. But I got the power and I want to kill them all. That's my thing. And when Armin died and they brought him back with the Titan power and he ate Bertolt to begin with, that was, again, I've said this already in this discussion. That was his argument for bringing Armin back as opposed to Erwin, because Aaron's like, I think about death. I think about killing. I think about killing the enemy. Armin thinks about positive things. He thinks about the ocean. He told me about the ocean. He told me about the fields of sand, the rivers of lava. He told me about all these things, this life that was out there, this new thing to experience, this beauty in the world. That's what he thinks about. That's what he fights for. I fight to kill. He fights to live, not just to survive. And that's important. That's an important starting point. And that idea of your core feeling having a strong impact on like the way things will move forward, and your disposition being important to the way that you approach problems is important in all of life, but it's important in the story specifically because that's what is reflected in the way that Eren and the way that anyone would interact with that power. When Eren got the power, like everything had already happened. Everything had happened. He didn't choose anything. He wasn't able to choose anything because it had happened. Anything that was going to happen was going to happen. He tried to change it multiple times. We see him throughout season 4. I just spit everywhere. We see him throughout season 4, like try and do different things. When he laughs when Sasha dies, he is like, he feels so defeated and so like, it's happening no matter what I do. Whether I do this, whether I try to say sorry to this kid, or whether I try to help him, or whether I, do this or that, it just doesn't matter. Nothing I do matters, and people are upset at that, but that's, again, it's life. Life is unfair. Life is, like, you aren't going to change all of human conflict, and no amount of crazy, knowledge is going to help you change other people's mind all the time. What's going to help do that is everybody together making decisions, going from the right point, choosing life, choosing to fight to live rather than to fight to kill, choosing to try and bring people together and try and understand each other and not, put yourself on the line. Go across the sea after all the fighting's over to try and go to these negotiations where you know that they will probably just kill you. Doing that anyway because it's in good faith and operating out of good faith and operating out of a want of understanding and love is going to yield far better results than all of what Eren did, clearly. And that's what Eren choosing to kill his mom was about. It wasn't a choice. It had already happened, and it was happening currently every moment that he had that power, because that's how he experienced time. It all works together, and I feel like that's a really small thing to get upset about in the whole grand scheme of the story, compared to everything that I just talked about. Sorry, go on.
Well, I was just gonna say, and like Eren trying to change his path, but at the same time, everyone else, they have no knowledge of their future path, but they're on it anyway. So like that is also what they kind of mean when Historia is talking about, like, it's not just Eren's choices, because Eren was making the choices that he was making based off of the millions of other choices that everyone else was making every day around him. And that's why it's like he's trying to find a solution, but he can't think of anything new, and no one else is like intervening soon. Like someone could have just came in and tried to kill him like immediately. Like he could have gotten killed that first day that he became a Titan when Armin like spoke up for him and saved him. Yeah. Things could have happened if other characters made other choices. If Mikasa didn't try so hard to defend him. If Annie had like done something like, there's so many points in the story that it could have gone a different way, but it didn't, because not only was Eren on this predetermined path, but so was everyone else. And it's kind of the same thing of like,
it just doesn't feel that way when Eren can see everything, that it becomes like confusing.
But it's like it's almost like him being able to see the past and future and this and that all at the same time is irrelevant to how the story actually plays out. All it does is cause him more suffering because he wants desperately to change it, but he can't. Yeah.
That's what Daru's saying here. Daru says, remember when Eren talked with Hanji in the cell about how she had no plans? I think that showed maybe that he was looking for more plans. Well, yeah, I think that my interpretation of his understanding of all the powers and everything is that, like, when he was at the medal ceremony, he got like a lot of insight into what was going to happen, and he got a big flash, and he experienced a lot at once. And that guided him for like a long time. But I don't think he fully had that like, he saw what was going to happen, but he still was acting to try and change it up until the point where he came in contact with Zeke. Once he came in contact with Zeke and he got immersed in there, and they had that whole thing where he was like shackled in the paths world, and then he like ripped out his arms or something, like went to touch Ymir and like got in contact with her. That's when the whole understanding, he became one with everything, and the control fully went away. The control was always not there. He thought that he could change things and make things different because he saw flashes and he saw memories of like the future and everything. And he thought like, I'll try to do everything I can, but it ended up being a self-fulfilling prophecy because it already happened. Because time is a flat circle. Everything had already happened up to that point. And that's what was depressing about everything. That's why he was so angry and pissed off, and why he was so desperate to try and change things, is because he knew where things were going. But he because he wasn't fully in contact with Ymir, because he wasn't a royal family member, he didn't know how deterministic and how pointless trying was. That was, if you remember, before anybody had power. That's what Uri and all the previous royal family members, Frida, all of them, when they got that glow in their eyes, that's what was going on. They were like, oh my God. And that glow in the eyes thing kind of went away eventually. Like Eren didn't have that glow in his eyes, I think, once he got in contact with Ymir. It was a story that when they had these like purple glowing eyes, that was like a that was a visual storytelling convention to let us know, like, you know, if you think about Rod Reese and his brother, they were like he was talking to his brother. He's like, hey, Uri, like, you're going to save everyone right now. You got the power now. We can do our plan. We can save everybody. We can fight back. We can take control now that you have the power. And then Uri went through the same thing that Eren was going through when he was with Ymir and with Zeke, where he's just like, it's over. Like, it doesn't matter what I do. Like, everything is happening at once. I'm experiencing life. And that's when he goes to like hanging out with Kenny and just like withering away and dying, because he saw what Eren saw at the very end and saw how pointless everything is, because he was tapped into all of time at the same time. And it's not about choosing to do this or choosing to do that. Everything had already happened. And that's what we never understood, what we should have understood by the very end. But a lot of people, I think, forgot that because they were so wrapped up in what was happening in season 4.
Mm-hmm. So why didn't he make them forget about the rumbling and he could have saved Hanji, saving their freedom more important than saving their lives? It literally is to Eren. That's his entire deal, is that he's not fighting to save their lives, he's fighting to save their freedom, which is why he like is kind of just okay with them killing him in the end, because it's their freedom to do that. Yeah,
he knew he was going to sacrifice himself from the beginning, yeah. I mean, he literally knew, because like he saw it. He saw that he saw how everything was going to play out. He tried to change it. It didn't work, because that's how, you know, it is. It already happened. If he didn't, here's the thing. Think of it this way. If he didn't have insight into all of that, would it be so bad? It's only bad. It's people don't like it because like, you revealed at the very end that it was all predestined and determined, and Eren had no agency, and all that shit that he said meant nothing. I think at the point that he was saying it, he wasn't as aware of he thought that he could change things, and he was trying to do things the best that he could. He saw doom coming on the horizon. He saw the rumbling. He saw everything, and was like, I need to do everything that I can to change it. Gets in contact with Zeke. Oh shit. Or like, not even before that, when Sasha dies, he's like, this was one of those like keystone moments that like, we're still on the path to destruction. And I guess that's it. I guess we're fucked.
And this, he took away Hanji's freedom by killing her. Again, he didn't take away anything. All of them could have stayed on the island and been safe.
Yeah.
But because
I think you guys don't understand that it wasn't wasn't making choices at that point. He had no, there was no, everything had happened. Everything in the future and in the past was happening at the same time in his brain, across time. Every moment was happening at once, consecutively and simultaneously at the same time. There was no like, oh, well, he could have done this. It was done. It was done. He was living in the world that was already created, and he became fully aware of that when he got in control of the rumbling and when that all happened. like before that he saw that it would all happen. He thought he could change it. Things kept happening the way he knew they would. And eventually he's like, maybe if I get full control, I can actually turn the tide. Maybe that's what I need. He gets it, and it's over. It's done. And that's it. I feel like people just are not understanding that like Eren had no control in that, or they do understand that. They're trying to make a version of the story where he does have control, or that, they don't like that he doesn't have control. And again, I just keep going back. That's what life is about. Life is unfair. Life is like, you don't have control in life. Eren tapped into the center of reality and understood the flow of time and realized that everything happens as a result of everybody's choices. And he can't change anything by knowing it. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, you guys, I don't think you're understanding. That's what the story is about. That's what the story is about. I'm sorry.
And as I feel like we don't need to go into this again, but his character wasn't retconned or assassinated. I think that was like one of the first things that we talked about in this discussion, about how his character is literally the same character as he was in season 1 through 3. And his character at the end is only different from the fake facade that he was putting up during season 4.
Yeah. So the main character wasn't making choices. Incredible writing. He was making choices.
We said a million times.
I don't know how else to put this to you guys. Like, I don't know what else to say. I've been repeating in different ways and giving different examples the whole time. You guys are just pissed off about the same thing. I've tried to talk. You guys aren't even responding to what I'm saying. You guys are copy pasting the same thing about how he didn't make a choice, about how none of it matters and how it's bullshit and they should have, like, I just don't know what you want. I don't know what you want. Like, the story again, it's consistent with the rest of the story. It just is not consistent with the fake version of Eren and the way that the story that people wanted to. I just don't get it. I don't get what you want from it. I seriously don't get it. It's not a plot hole. It was all set up. I don't understand what you want. Titanfolk found the stream. I guess so. I guess we could end it there, because at this point it's just going to get toxic and people are just going to start being dumb. Because like we've tried. Like I've been trying to reach out a hand and like try and explain things from my perspective, and everybody is just either I'm not going to change your mind, so that's fine. You guys now know what I think, No choices exist in a deterministic flat circle. Yeah, he thought they did. He got a glimpse of the future. He tapped into the past when he touched the story during the medal ceremony. Then he spent the next couple years trying to fix things and doing what he thought was right, or thought would change things. All the while, things kept happening down the road that he was going. That's like when he was in the alleyway and he could have saved, was a kid getting the shit beat out of him and robbed or something. And like he walked past the alleyway and was like, I wanted to save him, but I couldn't, or there was no point, or whatever. I don't know how to explain determinism to you in a 20th way. I've already done it so many times. I just think you guys just don't like that, and you're allowed to not like it, but I'm trying to like have a conversation and explain everything, and it's okay to not like determinism and but I think genuinely, and this isn't me shitting on anyone for not liking it, I think the dislike comes from a misunderstanding of what that means in the context of all the themes and the context of how consistent that is with the themes that have been discussed for the rest of the story. I'm not saying that to call anyone dumb or anything, or to say, I'm just saying it's a part of the series, and it has been a part of the series for a long time. And I feel like it had been properly set up. It had been properly set up both in the way the actual literal events took place, and in the way that that Isayama approached the philosophies behind the story and all the themes. I feel like everything was very consistent, and it was very strong, and people are just, I just don't like, just weren't prepared for it, didn't pick up on it, and don't like that things, I just don't know what else to say.
Oingo Boingo Brothers ripoff.
Oh my god. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that we can leave it there, because if like it just seems like there's some people out there. I'm sorry, you guys don't like it. To me, I feel like I feel like I understand it. I feel like I got it. I feel like to me, it feels very consistent. All the I didn't have that thing where like, oh, why is Aaron acting this way? This doesn't make any sense. Why would Aaron do that? I don't know how else to say it other than I've already said it. To me, it makes perfect sense. Not perfect sense. There's a couple things that were definitely clumsy. Obviously, I'm not saying it's a perfect ending. There were some things that could have been done better, like with all the Ymir and King Fritz stuff. I feel like there was a little flip-floppiness if you look at the way that it was set up earlier on when Rod Reese was all talking about it and with his whole family and everything. But even that part of the story, Isayama admits that he felt like that was done kind of clumsily and they needed to reorder some things and change some stuff around for the anime, even in season 3. So he admits to that. And, obviously it's true. I mean, like everybody knew from even when that arc was going on, they were just like, this is it feels kind of weird. It felt kind of weird because it was all Titans before that. And then it was all people versus people, but it was setting up what the story would eventually become later in the story. And, I just feel like it's for me, it's fully consistent with all that shit. And, I don't know. There's some things that could have been explored better, but yeah. A lot of storylines that led nowhere. I feel like I'm getting trouble. I'm not reading your stuff anymore. I'm sorry. I'd love to. Well, actually, let's read that one since I started reading it.
Sorry.
Unless there's more you want to say.
A bunch of people are asking about, whatever, like, oh, how could Ymir love Fritz after all that? It's, we were kind of talking about it earlier with how Mikasa and Aaron's relationship and the love between them, although it was love, was like kind of toxic and unhealthy. And obviously the same is definitely could be said, and even more so with how Ymir loved Fritz, because obviously it was not a loving or caring relationship.
Just move it up in front of your mouth.
Okay. It was not like a loving and caring relationship, but she like got attached to him in a certain like twisted, weird, warped sense of love, and it's hard to explain, but there are like different types of love, and people can feel that like attachment and love to someone who is a terrible and bad person, and but it doesn't mean that can't happen, I guess is what I'm saying.
Love was a big thing from day one. I hate that people was like, hey, love stuff came out of no place. It's like, well, yeah, that was Mikasa's whole thing of like, this is cruel, but it's also beautiful. And it became kind of a meme. That was kind of the whole thing. Yeah, I don't know. It's just arguments were already given by BOLDcast, but the comments are still redundant. And that is part of the Jaeger's users. Someone explains the ending in newest interview. Listen, Isayama, I'll take some interviews to like fill out some of like his intentions with things. But I don't need him to explain the ending. I feel like authors, it's the death of the author. There's too many authors out there, especially in like the world of manga and light novels, especially with light novels, who rely on interviews and blog posts and supplementary material to fill out their world. And I feel like they're taking too much advantage of the modern internet age, and I feel like the art of just letting your story stand on its own is quickly being lost. And I feel like I got enough out of Isayama's setup of the story that I don't need to read him as a human being in the real world explain why these fake characters ended up the way that they were. I feel like he did enough to say what he needed to say in his story. And I think that his biggest mistake is constantly talking in interviews, and this goes for every author, every successful author. Like you need to just stop let your story speak for itself. That's the reason why the story is there, to explore ideas. If you just explore the ideas in an interview when some like random journalist for some shitty website is asking you why you did this, it's like, why are you answering? Just fucking let the story let people look at the story for your opinions and for what you think about this or that. I haven't seen one anime not only like I haven't seen one anime only not like the ending. One anime only not like the ending. These manga readers are furious, Titanfolk, that there's such a minority now. Yeah. I think that it's also just the nature of running a reaction channel that you're going to get like the most enthusiastic part of each fan base So that's why you get a lot more. I'm not saying like all Titanfolk people are toxic, but like when you get like the most extreme part of a fan base, there's going to be people who are far more deeply attached to, like, that's why they're looking up reactions, because they're deeply attached more than the rest of the community to the thing that is being discussed. So that's why they have such strong opinions, and why the strong opinions on that side of things are making it into here, because they're like the most enthusiastic part of the fan base. So it makes sense, and I think it does. That also explains why. And thank you for the super chat, by the way, Daniel Jennings. That's why it is what it is. It is what it is. That's why they're here. That's why people interact with reactions, and why you see a lot of Jaegerists in the comment section of a lot of reaction videos, is because they are the most enthusiastic. They also have the most to prove. They're a minority, especially now that the anime's out. They're a minority viewpoint as far as their wants and interpretations of the ending. They're a substantial minority, but the majority of people, I think, are just kind of whatever. It was all right. It was a good ending. I'm glad it ended. And then a lot of people like it. And I think a lot of people don't like it. And then there's a subsection of that who are like the, Titanfolk Jaegerist type people. Anyway, I think I've said all I needed to say. I think I've explained myself pretty well. Unless there's any more that you want to say.
I think that's pretty much it. I think if we keep talking, we'll probably go around in circles.
Yeah. I still don't know if Reiner died virgin waiting for Historia. What do you think, Thomas? Oh, Mac asks. Sorry, I didn't read your comments, Mac. Will Reiner die a virgin? I don't know. I feel like it doesn't matter. Fuck Reiner. No, I'm just kidding. Reiner's probably my favorite character.
No one cares whether he's a virgin or not.
Yeah, bitch. Reiner's probably my favorite character, personally. I think there's a big difference in expressing thank you for being a genocide. What did you say, Mac? I think there's a big difference in expressing thank you for being a genocide manga to you and me will go to hell for this anime. Oh, that was the big line that was changed.
Yeah, I don't know if it was exactly that line, but it was along the lines of like, thanks for like doing this horrible thing for the sake of us. Whereas in the anime, I think it was made more clear of like,
he was empathizing with Eren, yeah.
Like, you made the choices that you made, and I can appreciate that, but I also made the choice, like, I don't know.
Yeah. No, yeah, oh, what up, Waxack? Yeah, I can see people being, like, weirded out by that, and then, like, for Armin to say that, and then not the genocide to, like, take place and actually happen, like, fully, I could see that, but it's also, like, the point that Isayama is clearly, like, if there's one thing you can get out of his personality from this, it's that he very much struggles, and even the creation of the Titans in his mind, his idea, everybody knows this, but his idea for the Titans initially came from, he was at a bar, and this drunk guy was like falling all over him and stuff, and like just being stupid, and he was like, what a dopey, pathetic piece of trash. I wonder what would, I bet it would be funny, what if he was, it's almost like he was a giant monster who was just a complete idiot and didn't understand anything I was saying. Fuck this guy. And that was his impetus for creating the Titans as a monster, these big, dopey, drunk morons who just stumble around and eat people. Because it's kind of funny, and they're funny to draw. And, so there's a very clear sort of regretful misanthropy throughout Attack on Titan of this, like, we should be trending towards the good and like humanity thriving, but also a part of me just really fucking hates people so much. And that sort of struggle within him is played out in Eren, it's played out in Armin, it's played out in Annie, it's played out in Erwin, it's played out in every character who makes a significant decision. They're like, at least on the good side, they're like, and if it's a bad character, it's like the opposite. They're like more concerned with like their selfish desires over like humanity. But in the end, it's like Kenny still, had love for Levi or whatever. Like there's that kind of tinge to everything. It's like, all these people sort of doing what they think is best and trying to be the hero and being drunk on something, as Kenny put it. and with great sacrifice to like a lot of innocent people. So I feel like that's kind of like throughout a lot of Attack on Titan is this feeling of this distaste for humanity, but also knowing that like what the right thing to do is at the end of the day, even if it is a little bit impossible, it's still kind of the right thing to do. I don't know. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you, Dark, for the super chat. Okay, Guts, I think you're trolling. I think Guts Vagabond is trolling. Is that who that boy trolling me right now? Is that Dan? Anyway, I think that's it. I think I'm done. I think you guys understand where I'm coming from, and I definitely understand where you guys are all coming from. I've been reading your comments and everything. So, is there anything else you want to say?
I don't think so. Let me consult my notes.
Is it? Wait, are you Is it Dan? Is that literally Dan trolling me right now? For Saint to react to this? Who are you talking about? Nothing else in your notes?
Nope.
Alrighty. Leave a like, everybody. Subscribe to the channel. We might be doing more Attack on Titan stuff. We're kind of bogged down and kind of really on the grind right now, so we won't be reacting to it right now, but we want to eventually do a rewatch of all of Attack on Titan at some point and do discussions throughout. And possibly Kabaneri of the Iron Fortress, because Lindsay hasn't seen that. So we'll probably be checking those out at some point and doing more thorough discussions for each season of Attack on Titan. That probably won't happen for like a while, but you can still stay tuned for that. Keep that in your mind, because there's still a lot that we have to say about like the whole series. We tried to focus this more on like the ending. Tier list, maybe we'll do more. Leave your suggestions in the comments after the stream ends, of like what video ideas or things that you would want to hear us talk about, or video, but just things that you want to see us kind of do. But yeah. Thank you guys all for talking, for chatting, thank you, Jay Snow, for interacting with the chat. You were here like the whole time, so thank you so much for that. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thank you all for the super chats. Thank you all for everything that you do for the channel. Much love. See you guys later. I'm Carson.
I'm Lindsay. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.